Call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to approve today's agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Cass, second by Mary. Any further discussion? None. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Which is carried. The agenda is approved. We're moving on to public comment. The state board's agenda is full, and I'll place a maximum of 30 minutes for public comment. I'll give each speaker 5 minutes or 3 minutes if there are a large number of speakers. At the end of your allotted time, I'll ask you to conclude, and the board will move on to the next speaker. The department will not respond to public comment aside from requesting clarification. The department will place a topic raising public comment on a future agenda. A topic from public comment that does not relate to an item on today's agenda will not be addressed at today's meeting. Do we have public comment today?
Good morning. If you wish to address the board today, please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. And if you happen to be calling in, you can press *9 to raise your hand. All right, last call for those just joining us. If you want to address the board, use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, or press *9 on your phone. And I do have one. Mr. Jeremy Voss.
Hey, Jeremy.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. I just have a brief statement. I'm Jeremy Voss. I am the lobbyist for Homeschool Iowa and also a homeschooling dad. Ooh, wow, that's an old picture. Sorry. Anyway, good morning and thank you, members of the Board of Education, Director Snow, Madam Vice President, and President Robbins. First off, I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you, our gratitude to you for your dedication to the parents and children of Iowa. And I also bring thanks from families across the great state of Iowa who have chosen home education as their primary means of fulfilling their sacred duty to provide for the educational and spiritual development of their most precious blessings, their children. And today I'm honored to just publicly commend the Department of Education, and in particular, Mr. Mays, for his leadership in the rewriting of rules for chapters 22 and 31, which directly impact home education families. Our recent interactions with the department have fostered a growing sense of mutual understanding and respect. Mr. Mays has been an indispensable resource guiding us through the intricacies of Iowa's rulemaking process. His gracious communication, insightful guidance during the public comment period, and commitment to preserving and protecting Iowa code have been invaluable for us. So on behalf of myself, the board of Homeschool Iowa, and the entire Homeschool Iowa community, we deeply appreciate this partnership and we eagerly anticipate the continued collaboration in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Congratulations, Thomas. Are there any other public comment this morning?
Thank you. Once again, if you're just joining us and you would like to make a comment to the board, use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen or press *9 on your phone. All right, that appears to be it.
Okay, I'll move on to the director's report. Director Snow.
Thank you, President Robbins, Vice President Axiotis, and members of the State Board of Education. This is our last board meeting of the state fiscal year, and we thank each of you, as always, for your service and critical leadership on the State Board of Education. Today, we are organizing the director and the department's report a little differently. We'll organize our updates by the department's top 4 priorities. So to kick us off, looking at our priority and shared priority with the board to empower students with multiple pathways to post-secondary success. On June 12th, the department announced 5 Iowa school districts have been selected to pilot the Credentials to Childcare Careers Grant Program that empowers high school students to attain a nationally recognized, industry recognized credential called the Child Development Associate while in high school. So these grants really focused at meeting communities and schools where they are. They include support for new and existing family and consumer sciences CTE programs to partner with community childcare centers in their community or to grow or launch childcare centers within the school district. So really the goals in this pilot program are threefold: to prepare students for success in post-secondary education and in-demand careers through supporting students in attaining that CDA, to recruit and retain an early childhood workforce that is of and for the benefit of the local communities they serve, and to expand access to high quality childcare and support working families and communities across Iowa. So we really commend the awardees. They are Council Bluffs, MMCRU, Sioux Central, Starmont, and Woodbine school districts for their leadership in realizing this shared priority to expand multiple pathways to post-secondary success, while also supporting a strong childcare workforce and working families. The next exciting announcement is around the Career Academy Incentive Fund. So on June 13th, Governor Reynolds and the department awarded over $3.6 million to 4 Iowa community colleges through this fund to further grow access to Career Academy programs in in-demand fields through new and expanded regional centers. So a new regional center is at Iowa Western, or is coming soon to Iowa Western Community College in Glenwood, and it will offer 5 Southwest Iowa school districts access to 4 career academies in cybersecurity, mass digital communications, robotics, and precision agriculture. And then there are 3 expansion grants. First is an Eastern Iowa Community College that's going to expand the Muscatine Industrial Technology Center that serves 6 school districts, providing new lab space for career academies in computer numerical control machining, digital modeling for manufacturing, engineering technology, and welding. And then Iowa Valley Community College District is going to provide additional lab space for their automotive repair technician academy in Grinnell, and support enrollment growth across 6 area high schools and existing academies that span business, administration, health sciences, manufacturing, and para-educator preparation. And then finally, Iowa Central Community College will modernize their North Central Career Center with new health sciences equipment, serving 4 surrounding districts in Eagle Grove. And the North Central Career Center offers 6 career academies in business, education, health sciences, industrial mechanics, and machines technology, liberal arts, and welding. So we are really excited about the impact of these new and expanded career academies. Then finally, in this space, the department and the Bureau of Iowa College Aid were recently awarded just over $333,000, $330,000, in competitive funding from AmeriCorps, which is, of course, the National Federal Service and Volunteerism Agency. The grant is going to help further and expand Iowa's successful course to college post-secondary education programming. And it supports nearly 70 AmeriCorps members serving as student leaders and course to college coaches, as well as Iowa high school counselors who are serving as summer transition associates to ensure that students are supported year-round and throughout the summer months. And these AmeriCorps members are partnering with 29 different school districts across the state of Iowa. And then up next in our priority and our shared priority to strengthen early literacy and evidence-based reading instruction, we have an exciting announcement about the Iowa Reading Research Center. So alongside the University of Iowa's College of Education Dean Dan Clay, we recently announced that the director of the IRRC will be Dr. Sean Dadchuk. Dr. Dachuk is a former K-12 special education teacher, elementary teacher, special education director, and academic performance director. And most recently, he served as a professor of special education in the University of Iowa College of Education, where he worked closely with the Iowa Reading Research Center. And in this role, he will support the department's work and the board's work to implement new legislation that's been spearheaded by Governor Reynolds and the General Assembly to advance evidence-based reading instruction and the science of reading. So we look forward to having him join a future board meeting after he officially joins the team and assumes this role at the end of the month. We were also excited to announce an update on our evidence-based letters professional development. We added letters for early childhood educators to the list of PD offered to support evidence-based reading instruction. And letters for early childhood educators empowers educators of young children with a deeper knowledge and clarity of effective strategies to prepare all students for success in kindergarten and beyond. The department-sponsored letters training is offered at no cost to early childhood administrators and educators, providing statewide voluntary preschool program, shared visions preschool program, or early childhood special education. And as a reminder, our next cohort of letters professional development begins in August for both K-12 and early childhood educators. And then finally, in this space, the department also launched a new summer reading camp grant that will provide up to $2 million total in competitive grants to support schools in creating, expanding, and sustaining evidence-based summer reading programs. The department will support districts in designing high-quality summer reading programs, and we're again partnering with the Iowa Reading Research Center to evaluate and inform the continuous improvement of these summer reading programs. Then thirdly, in the space of narrowing and closing achievement gaps through accountability and support, the department is offering 2 mini grant opportunities to support school districts with students and families who are experiencing homelessness. And the Resource Hub mini grant will support up to $10,000 in school district grants to create a space in schools where students and families can access resources for personal hygiene, sustainable food pantries, sustainable clothing closets, washer dryers, portable showers, and other basic needs students and families who are experiencing homelessness may have. And this grant is open through July 1st. The second mini grant that we're offering is a transportation mini grant that provides up to $30,000 to rural districts in providing transportation options. This can include the purchase of gas cards, public transportation services, private transportation services, and in certain cases, vehicle purchases. And this grant opportunity targeted at rural districts closes on June 24th. We also have an update on our continuous improvement professional learning. So this June, July, and August, the department is also partnering to host free regional sessions to provide essential learning opportunities for districts across Iowa, prioritizing those school districts who are identified for support. These sessions were informed by the needs assessments of schools identified for support under our state and federal accountability system. And the 3 sessions are instructional rounds to support evidence-based instruction and interventions, camps and discipline in secondary classrooms to support positive approaches to academic and behavioral expectations in the classroom. And then finally, engaging learners to support evidence-based student engagement strategies that include checks for learning to be used as formative assessment. So we're really excited to be offering those evidence-based professional learning opportunities to schools identified for improvement and to schools across Iowa this summer. And then just a quick update on our math standards that you adopted in April. We continue to support the implementation of math standards. There's been 10 professional learning sessions thus far led by the math team that you've met. 5 have been focused on K-8 and 5 have been focused on 9-12 thus far. And then finally, in this space, House File 2612 requires the department to quote, develop and distribute to school districts, accredited non-public schools and AEAs a list of evidence-based professional development services that an AEA may provide to a public school or accredited non-public school. And in implementing those provisions of the Act, the department is developing a list of evidence-based professional development services informed by expert reviews based on a public rubric. And as you'll recall, to inform this process and the public rubric, we conducted 3 listening sessions in May of this year. One inviting all AEA chiefs, AEA education services and special education services leaders, the curriculum network, which includes school district curriculum directors and other instructional leaders, and all superintendents. We then updated our draft rubric reflecting the feedback that we received during these listening sessions, and then sought all public feedback on the updated draft rubric via a public survey, which closes today. So we look forward to providing future updates in that space as well. And this work is in addition to the biweekly and now the weekly leadership meetings that the department has with all AEA chiefs as we continue to implement House File 2612 in partnership. Then shifting to our 4th priority around supporting a strong teacher pipeline. Just as a reminder, teacher salary minimum requirements under House File 2612 are effective July 1st, and the relevant FAQs from April are available on our website. June also is marking the end of the service year for our 2023 Iowa Teacher of the Year, Crystal Colbert. And Crystal's tenure, as you know, has been incredible. When she accepted the honor in November of 2012, she shared that her foundational goal was to, quote, ensure children felt loved, cared for, accepted, and valued. And Crystal has made that goal a reality for students every day in her 16 years of service and education, and during her past year as our Teacher of the Year ambassador. So we congratulate and we thank Crystal, and we welcome our 2024 Iowa Teacher of the Year, Ann Meeks, who's going to officially begin her role also on July 1st. And we'll work closely with this team, with our EL and our science of reading experts in the department as we identify instructional best practices and policies with demonstrated success in narrowing and closing achievement gaps experienced by students who are English language learners. As you'll recall, she's an English language educator and has expertise in leveraging the science of reading to best serve students who are English language learners. So we are excited to work with her over the next year. And then finally in this space, we have also, believe it or not, begun our process to find the 2025 Iowa Teacher of the Year. We collected nominations last spring, and this year, as you might remember, our selection process has been updated. We're going to receive nominations and select 9 regional teachers of the year, with one of those regional teachers of the year being named the 2025 Teacher of the Year. And we're pulling on educators across the state to help partner with our DE team to run those regional processes and be a part of those regional selection committees. And then finally, just some recent updates on travel and the opportunity to visit with and learn from educators and students and families across the state. On the last day of school at City High in Iowa City, we met with students and educators in the IJAG program. We were with freshmen and sophomores who shared how being a part of the IJAG program helped them explore careers, access work-based learning opportunities, and develop pathway plans and goals. And then while in Iowa City, we also met with students at West High to hear about their entrepreneurship curriculum and how their involvement in Iowa FBLA, one of Iowa's career and technical student organizations, or CTSOs, has developed their leadership and critical thinking skills. And then earlier in the month, we joined Lieutenant Governor Gregg to attend the North Iowa Area Community College's grand opening of their new regional center in Charles City, which was supported by a Career Academy Incentive Fund grant that we just provided an update on. And we also joined department team members Amy Giske and Heather Meissen for the Ellsworth Community College commencement in May, and had the opportunity recently to visit the Iowa Correctional Institution for Women in Mitchellville to see the post-secondary opportunities and supports offered to students who are incarcerated. And then finally, just earlier this week, we helped kick off the 2024 Iowa ACTE conference in Altoona. Over 100 CTE administrators and educators from K-12 and post-secondary education were in attendance, and several of our team members led breakout and plenary sessions for that conference. And that concludes my update. Happy to answer any questions that might have arisen.
I have a question. Just a little bit more about your summer reading program. Is this for targeted students across the state who are on grade level?
It is not.
Okay.
So it is open to all students. It is prioritizing, as many of our grant opportunities do, schools identified for improvement, and prioritizing
Okay.
programs
Okay.
that focus on evidence-based instruction in science of reading to narrow and close achievement gaps, but it is not limited to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for Director Snow? All right, hearing none, thank you so much. Item 3 on our agenda is the consent agenda. One item, the meeting minutes from May 9th, 2024.
Move adoption of the minutes.
Second. Moved by Brooks, second by Brian. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the minutes indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Carried. Minutes are approved. Rules, chapter 12, Thomas.
Three rulemakings before you today. The first is adopted and filed for chapter 12. You saw these rules at the notice stage in December. After you gave notice of your intended action, there was some intervening litigation. Portion of the underlying statute is enjoined. I'm not going to discuss that. If you need a discussion of that, we can arrange that with the Attorney General's office, who is representing the board, the governor, the director, and the department. Not the time or place to discuss litigation strategy in an open meeting. But you will see those items that are currently enjoined struck through. There were a lot of comments on most of the comments were on the matters that are subject of the injunction. Not going to discuss those. They're not discussed in the preamble either, but safe to say that that was the largest volume of comments. There were three comments related to matters that are not enjoined, and those are listed starting on page 2 of the rulemaking package in the preamble. The first requested additional clarification or additional modifiers to the definition of what is and what is not age appropriate. And after consideration, this is adding to the statutory text. The text that is quoted without the underscores is verbatim text. And so that's a legislative act, not an executive act, not a rulemaking act. However, the department has concluded in the analysis of this comment, the analysis of this request, that the main underlying policy question is addressed later in the very same rule, where the rule which says that references to sex acts. Mentions of are not descriptions of. So the department, after analyzing this comment, no changes are made because it is verbatim text and the proposed rule addresses the underlying concern, maybe not as much as the commenter would have wished, but it's within this, it addresses those organizations' concerns. The second item, same two organization, membership organizations requested in a couple of additions to the investigatory process under the parental rights provision. This provision is not currently enjoined. And the request was first require schools before the department investigates to follow local processes first. Ordinarily, that is something that we would encourage. If a family or a teacher or an administrator has a concern about a local matter, have you tried your local processes first? However, the statutory scheme does not permit that addition. It's an investigation by the department, not an investigation that the department is allowed to defer until local processes are resolved. So that portion of the comment, that's again a legislative concern, not an executive branch concern or a rulemaking concern. The second is a request to provide notification of licensed staff who are under investigation or whose conduct might have prompted the department's investigation. And no change is made because no change is necessary. Basic due process requirements entitle an individual whose conduct is under investigation to notice and an opportunity to be heard. So it's not necessary to spell out what the state and federal constitution require when somebody's profession, when somebody's livelihood might be at risk. So that is assumed just as a matter of constitutional law. Again, in the spirit of Executive Order 10, no need to spell it out. The final change was suggested what concerns the online posting of library catalogs. The rule that you gave notice to incorporated the statute by reference and said to meet the statute, if your catalog is not updated in real time, if your online catalog is not updated in real time, update it twice a year. This was designed to address concerns of small school districts who might not have the capacity or the figurative or literal bandwidth to have an online catalog in real time. The commenter suggested that this was inconsistent with the statute because the statute provides a waiver for maintaining an online catalog for the past and the coming school year. Again, that is not a contradiction because that waiver process is already incorporated by reference. So the incorporation by reference to the underlying statute includes what is incorporated by reference includes this waiver provision. What this text would do would say after the waiver has expired, after the ability to have a waiver has expired, you meet, if you at a minimum, you meet this requirement if you, school district, library director, maintain and update your online catalog twice a year. So understand the commenter's concerns, but the commenter's concerns are addressed in the spirit of Executive Order 10. So with that, do you have any questions for me? And the recommendation is to adopt.
Recommendation is to amend chapter 12 as presented.
Correct.
So moved.
Second.
By Brian, second by Brooke. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion, saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Just a note, it appears that the other items in chapter 12 were addressed in court. And then they're looking for a ruling on that sometime in August, hopefully.
Not going to discuss the merits, but I will discuss the timeline. There was oral argument earlier in the month of June before the United States Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit. And that a decision in that, the court's historic timeline has been about 2 months between oral argument and the court's opinion. So I will provide President Robbins, you can, since you're a named party, you can speak directly to the Attorney General's office, but if need be, we can have at the August meeting a strategy discussion with the AG's office, which I would recommend be in closed session. But
I was just informing the board that the other items that were enjoined have been, I guess, presented in court, so.
they've been presented in court. Depending on what happens, there might be another rulemaking package. Depending on the outcome of the injunction, the stricken matter may or may not be coming back before you, depending on how the court rules. But that would be for, because of timelines in the Administrative Procedure Act, it would be an entirely new rulemaking. It would reboot the process if the state board is permitted to consider the enjoined matter.
Thank you. All right. On chapters 19 and 68.
So you saw these in August. They're coming back to you for notice again for 2 reasons. First of all, the public comment on the proposal that you noticed at your August meeting was just so substantial and not in the vein of Executive Order 10. It was big substantive changes, not take out more of these words. You took out too many of these words. So the decision was made to reboot the notice process to give the public the opportunity to react to the comments made from the August rulemaking and to react to the department's reaction to those comments. So I'll briefly walk through those. The big concern was a second application window. Creating not 1, but 2 application windows where work would come before you throughout at 2 times in the year, 2 applications and 2 contract approvals rather than 1. And the judgment from the department staff is that would be no net positive. There wouldn't be a time saving for department staff. There wouldn't be a time saving for the board. And there was just a question of authority about to do so. So again, this is a question of, if there's a second application window, maybe this is a legislative ask rather than a regulatory ask. So the department is unable to do so based on underlying statutes. Within this particular sub-rule, there was some references to school years past. Those are stricken as no longer necessary. The next proposal in this rules package would codify your authority and the department's authority to have sample applications and sample contracts. And I know that had been a discussion in the last couple of cycles. Could there be a common metric? Could there be a common frame? It would be easier for you to do your work if it was apples to oranges, not apples to sheetrock. And so that codifies your authority to provide samples. Again, no authority to require, but authority to highly suggest. And depending on the quality of the applications and the sample contracts that are put together, my sense is that this would, instead of a requirement, would be voluntary but inevitable. They would be so good and so useful to charter organizers, founding groups, that everybody, and to the board, that everybody would use them. So that is the second item. The third item was a request for an earlier payment to charter schools to pay in to make the first payment in September based on September 1 enrollment data rather than August estimates. And that it's just the time would not permit the department to calculate those payments. It takes some time working with department management. So there really is no capacity to do such a quick turnaround. And the underlying issue is solved by the fact that there's adjustments throughout the year. It's water in the ice cube tray. If the estimates are too low, then the October payment and the November payment gets adjusted upwards. If the estimates are too high, subsequent payments get adjusted downwards. It works out throughout the school year. So unnecessary and beyond the ability to be realistic to calculate payments in a matter of days.
Is there a concern about initial cash flow, Tom?
There was a concern about initial cash flow, but if the estimates were to, even if the first payment in September was based on the actual count in September, there would be a cash flow issue throughout the year because it's not based on that single count. It's based on enrollment, the per day enrollment over time. So if enrollment increases throughout the year, unlike public school districts, the monthly payments increase throughout the year since it's per diem, not a single point in time student count. So I think it might be a concern about cash flow, but again, to have that September payment ready, it's an August estimate rather than September actuals in order to properly and timely calculate it and cut the check.
I understand that, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just thinking, is there a concern if somebody can't cash flow the initial month of the school year? That's all I'm saying. Go ahead.
Well, I think that has to be addressed through their business model and through their local decision making. They have the ability to borrow against future income. It's their business manager and their business planners can help them address that cash flow issue. I think there are adequate checks. They've got borrowing authority under Chapter 256E. I think I act like I know what I'm talking about, but the finance team here at the department could help coach them through their cash flow issues.
Thank you.
So the next proposed change is something that the department is actually seems well founded. There was a request for some additional specificity in our rule about what federal funds charter schools are eligible for. And after considering the comments in the spirit of Executive Order 10, there's no need to reference federal law, federal standards for charter school eligibility for federal programs. That takes care of itself in the Code of Federal Regulations in the United States Code. So that entire subsection is stricken as superfluous. Notifications of district of residence. This is a request. Some commenters associated with a particular charter school requested that notifications to districts of residence for billing be only for new students and not every student every year. This is inconsistent with billing practices for billing practices between districts, billing practices between districts and out of school placements. It wouldn't be a good business model to say, here are our new students without also accounting for here are the students who aren't here anymore. So some students elect out of the charter model. Some students might elect a different charter. And so providing information only in suggesting that the department can just find that out and tell the district of residence that those are inconsistent acts. So the notification to districts of residence, the department made no changes to this proposed rule. Some of this comment was based on an inaccurate premise about who does the count. Who does the count? The department doesn't do the air quotes, the count. The department and the Department of Management receive the count and calculate payments. Who does the count? Districts of residence. Final couple of sub rules. Activities participation, this is new from the past legislative session. It incorporates by reference a requirement and an option for participants at a virtual charter to participate in up to 2 activities a year in their district of residence and provides a payment mechanism. So if I attend a virtual charter, I live in Decorah, I can participate for up to 2 activities in my home community. I don't have to participate in those activities in the district where the charter has its home office. Final suggestion is that and again, this is something that might be a subject of further consideration. Several commenters requested that the annual report that each charter is required to submit be submitted to the department rather than to the state board rather than the department. The statute says department. Department is the object of that particular statutory sentence. It might make sense for reports to be submitted to the actual authorizers. But the department will provide you information during its annual and periodic reports to you about charter performance. So no changes made because it is a statutory requirement. With that, the recommendation is to give notice of intent to rescind and replace Chapter 19 with the text currently before you, and to rescind and reserve Chapter 68, which is for those of you who weren't here last year, Chapter 68 is the legacy charter chapter. Its content is folded into new Chapter 19. There's no need to have 2 rules chapters on charter schools.
Thomas, what were the 2 activities? Was that in legislation or?
That was in legislation from the past. Governor Reynolds signed a fairly comprehensive charter school bill. The only portion of the bill that is new that requires rulemaking is this activities piece. It came from the last legislative session. A lot of the amendments were to text that is incorporated by reference. So the references in here are shelf stable. There's no need to go in and rule make because they incorporate changes made by reference. The only thing that was new that required a couple of lines of rule text was the athletics participation. And it is similar to virtual high schools operated by a public school district that folks can open and enroll into. So if I attend the virtual high school operated in Clayton Ridge, I can participate under current law. I can participate in 2 activities in my resident district. I don't have to go to Clayton Ridge to play football. So this puts the virtual charter, any virtual charter school on the same foot as virtual high school operated by a public school district.
The questions for Thomas? Hearing none, I would receive a motion.
I move that the state board give notice of intent to rescind and replace Chapter 19 and rescind Chapter 68.
Moved by Brian, is there a second?
Second, Cindy.
Okay, second by Cindy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. All right, chapters 12, 21, 43, 44, and 98.
So I appreciate Mr. Voss's kind words. And one of the things that I try to do as your rules coordinator is to worry about the administrivia so you can worry about the policy. Worry about the administrivia to make sure that the policy advice, the policy text and the rules suit and align with your priorities. This is administrivia. This is things that only I care about. I care about them so you don't have to. these are technical corrections that are cleanup from Executive Order 10. Several of the rules add specific time references to external bodies of law, the Code of Federal Regulations, federal acts, federal guidance documents, industry publications. The reason why is the Administrative Procedure Act requires for any reference to law that's not the Iowa Code or the Iowa Administrative Code, there be a date certain. So if the U.S. Department of Education amends a regulation that the department incorporates by reference, the people of the state of Iowa, or you, get to decide whether or not that's still good public policy for the state of Iowa. So date certain, this adds in date certain to several rules references. The second thing is in one rule in chapter 43, which is 44, which is the school bus construction standards. Item 12, bottom of page 6. The drafters of that rule chapter cut too much. And so this is restoring a safety standard that didn't make it through various documents. It was dragged but not dropped. And then this, a couple months late, drops after it's been dragged. It adds in references to wheelchair lifts and the ability to secure wheelchair lifts in this specific model of vehicle or the specific class of vehicle. If I recall correctly, it is the ability to add wheelchair lifts into vans. So vans that are operated as school buses. So this corrects something that was inadvertently excluded. The final item Item 8 on page 5. This is an instance where the subject matter experts and I didn't cut enough. So there were references in our mediation procedures for special education to the subject matter of mediation. Those were already recited in a whole nother rule. So no need to recite it twice. Or the subject matter experts in preparing for a federal improvement visit had some questions about which rule applies. Solve that problem by having that text appear in only one rule. So with that, the recommendation is to clean up chapters 12, 21, 41, 43, 44, and 98, and give notice of intent to do so.
So a lot of the language in this is all as effective on February 7th, 2024. As inserted multiple.
The February 7th date is when those chapters were put out for notice originally. So there are other references in those chapters to a February 7th date. That was the date of publication of the notice of intended action to amend those chapters. So to be consistent, the February 7th date is applied because there are other references in those chapters to February 7th.
So if the federal regulations change, then we have to go back and change the dates.
Go back and change, yes. And that's by design, that's the legislative intent of the date certain requirement, because let's say a federal agency relaxes a requirement. And the judgment of the content area experts and the state board is that requirement should not be relaxed. It's the right public policy. We're going to, as a matter of state law, keep that old federal requirement because it's more protective of students. It's more protective of teachers' employment rights, whatever the case may be. So whenever there's a change to something incorporated by reference, even if that gives you and the public an opportunity to decide, is that the right public policy for the state of Iowa?
What if there was a change since February 7th?
There haven't been in this space.
Okay. It would be the February 7th rules,
It
though.
would be the February, yeah. So the rules that were noticed and published on February 7th were the origin for this February 7th date. There have been no changes to those, to any of the chapters.
On the other hand, if there's a stricter requirement coming out from the federal government, then we'd have to amend the date.
We'd have to amend the date or consider, we'd have to take some sort of action. Either amending the date or setting out the rule. The board would have to take some sort of action.
Other questions for Thomas? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I move we give notice of intent to amend chapters 12, 21, 41, 43, 44, and 98.
Second.
Moved by Brian and second by Mary. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Oppose, same sign. Motion carried.
For just storyboarding out, you will see the last two rules packages at your September meeting. That's the earliest that they could be adopted and filed. And I actually guessed right on the amount of time these rules would take. I guessed around 30 minutes and it's been around 30 minutes. So thank you for your attention.
All right, item 5 on the agenda is the revision of Iowa academic standards for English language arts. Final read.
You can just pull one of those from the side.
So good morning, Wanda and I are pleased to return today to present the next action step in the revision process for the Iowa Academic Standards for English Language Arts and Literacy in History, Social Studies, Science, and Technical Subjects. On May 9, 2024, we presented the initial phases of this revision process. The first step involved a dedicated team of 38 stakeholders, including teachers, administrators, instructional leaders, parents, and representatives from industry, business, and the community. Their collective effort was instrumental in reviewing and proposing changes to the existing standards. The next step was to initiate a public comment period to gather a wide range of perspectives. This comprehensive process included a public survey, listening sessions, and focus groups. The public survey received 117 responses. 32 people registered for the public listening sessions and the focus groups. We received verbal or written feedback from 15 attendees. Our aim was to ensure that revised standards were informed by diverse insights and feedback. We achieved stakeholder and geographical representation from all 9 regions across the state. Following public comments, a second team of 24 educators, administrators, instructional leaders, industry representatives, parents, and again, community partners carefully reviewed all of the feedback. Their work culminated in the final proposed document that we presented at the last state board meeting.
Since the last state board meeting, there has been no additional feedback related to the new standards. In anticipation of the board's final approval, we have developed a comprehensive plan to support educators in implementing the new standards. This plan includes professional training sessions scheduled for July and August with ongoing professional learning opportunities moving forward. Therefore, we are here today to respectfully request the board's approval to enact the 2024 Iowa Academic Standards for English Language Arts and literacy in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects.
And if you allow me for a moment, April got Frank Lemke. She also helped kick off that review process before her maternity leave. So I just wanted to introduce her. She was able to join us today.
Any questions or comments?
I think I said at the last meeting, it's a very comprehensive review. And we appreciate the work and the number of people that you included in this review process. And I'm excited for our students moving forward with this clarity and great work.
I just want to add to Board Member Meisterling's comments. Obviously, you've gotten to know as a board the incredible expertise represented on our ELA content expert team, and just so appreciate their really diligent and collaborative work, again, to achieve that stakeholder and geographic representation across teachers, administrators, higher education, families, community partners, employers, that we can bring before the state board best in class ELA standards for your consideration. And just so grateful to the team for their leadership and expertise.
Well done.
Thank you.
Now we need to approve them. Or adopt them.
The adoption of the, well, let me try to get this right. English language arts education standards.
It's been moved by Brooke,
I'll second.
second by Mary. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one follow-up question. How will we be apprised of the results of the implementation of the comprehensive
Absolutely. So
plan?
we're already in conversations with communications departments. And so we're going to be sending out multiple methods to be able to notify the field. So I already have drafted for our literacy news that we send out, professional learning opportunities for educators. We also have drafted and shared with Tina the superintendent's notes updates. And then we're working with our communications department to provide a headline story and social media updates moving forward. So you will see a lot of those posted very soon.
I'm seeing the signs of reading all over the media. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Item 6 on the agenda, a discussion of boards and commissions. Eric, is that you?
I think I'm done.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. I'll tee off the conversation, but it's my understanding also some planning discussions that you all want to have amongst yourself about some of the discussions that have been occurring. So the background on this, though, the reason you're discussing these is all File 2385 was passed this last legislative session. It was a comprehensive review and reorganization of the state's boards and commissions. So there was numerous changes proposed statewide, either modifying or consolidating, merging or eliminating various boards and commissions. And so specific to the State Board of Education, there was a couple of changes. To the membership of the committee, and these will all take effect starting July 1, the effective date of the legislation. There is changes to the membership, reduce the total number from 10 to 9. There are 7 voting members on the state board going forward. There is 1 non-voting student member, and then the director of the Iowa Workforce Development will be joining as a non-voting official member as well. There was authority granted to the State Board of Education to adopt ad hoc committees to advise the work of the state board as well. And so some of the other changes, talking, as I mentioned, there were some boards and commissions that were eliminated as well. Those that were under the purview of the Department of Education, that included the Non-Public School Advisory Council, the Community College Council, childhood stakeholder alliance, non-educator leadership and compensation, and the quality faculty plan professional development committee, which was in space. Are there any questions about the contents of the legislation that I can share to help inform the discussion?
Any questions for her?
You know, I didn't follow this legislation all the way to the end and what the governor signed. Basically, the recommendations that were made by the committee to the legislature, was that basically what got approved in the end?
I think they were closely aligned.
Very
Can't
closely
say
aligned.
They were exact,
Okay.
but yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So now where do we go?
Happy to tee things up and then defer to board member Hull and board member Kane, but there have been discussions about two of the specific previously statutorily established advisory councils or committees in the purview of the Board of Education to form advisory committees in these spaces. The first of which is the Community College Advisory Committee. Happy to, let me pass it to board member Halls, but I'm happy to supplement anything.
Okay, well, I guess we'll jump in unless Brian wants to go first.
Oh.
So the Community College Council is, in its original shape was actually part of Code 256.31 subsection 3, and had an original charter of reviewing specific items and bringing recommendations to the state board. And in a new form, what we are proposing is creating an advisory committee to provide the state board members with deeper knowledge and understanding of community college issues so that we can better oversee Iowa community colleges and advise the department and inform statewide practices on issues related to community colleges. What was important to us in reshaping that charter is making sure that as we participate in those discussions, that we are able to make the best use of department time, board member time, and have broader perspective around the table to make sure that as we're informing those discussions, that the impact on the work that we have is incredibly valuable. So in changing the composition of that, we would like to extend invitations to a broader group of folks. Previously, the Community College Council included 4 board members and a community college president and a community college trustee, and then was supported by several members of the Department of Education staff. In a new shape, we would like to extend invitations to several different roles from the community college system, have 2 members of the Board of Education have representation, and then continue to leverage members of the Department of Education team to better have a cohesive conversation and tie all of those pieces together. Typically, we would have met every Wednesday prior to the Thursday Board of Education meeting, again, because there were items that we needed to take action on according to the rules that we were governed by. But because those items now will come directly to the board for consideration, we are obligated to take that action to provide those recommendations. So under our new proposal, the Community College Advisory Committee would just meet 4 times per year to support being able to evaluate some of those practices. And we're proposed November, February, May, and August, which I think will be effective. And then we've already kind of started shaping our agendas to be able to time those meetings along with supporting effective discussions.
Can you share some examples of expanding representation?
Absolutely. We would retain a community college president and community college trustee from the original form, and then a chief academic officer, a chief business officer, a chief student officer, a represented representative from the Regents Universities, Community Colleges for Iowa, a high school counselor, CCTC representative, and then a business community member / trustee type. Two-year term lengths with new terms beginning September 1st.
We need action from our board to approve this new.
Well, we don't approve it this meeting.
Correct. So the membership is ultimately appointed by President Robbins and then would be approved by the board at likely the August meeting.
If I might just comment, as having served on the Community College Council, I think it's really important that we continue to provide the board with that perspective as we look at that, you know, continuum of education through K-12 into our community colleges, and then, you know, we're on to employment or 4 years of college, higher ed. And so I think, you know, it continues to be really important that we're all aligned around this, because obviously we're pulling in the same direction to ensure that our students are, you know, well prepared, obviously that our institutions are solid and functioning effectively and appropriately. So, you know, I hope under this new the new committee structure versus the council structure that, you know, we'll continue to have that level of information, oversight, and assurance, you know, that our community colleges are continuing to work and do such amazing, you know, provide amazing services for whether traditional or non-traditional students in both credit and non-credit areas. So I just think that's a really important element to keep in mind.
I agree. And I appreciate the work that you've done on reconsideration of an advisory committee, a council committee. So I don't have any questions and would support that.
So, yeah, you're kind of, excuse me, going to be leading this committee potentially if appointed.
I think that was assumed. Yeah.
Vote for Cassandra.
Well, and I'll note, Cindy has volunteered to, I know we aren't talking these pieces, but I do want to share, Cindy has volunteered to continue to serve forward as well, for your consideration. It is an incredibly important piece of our system, and I know it's something that you all know that I'm very passionate about. And just on the heels of Cindy's comments, it's also really important to continue to think about the number of students, high school students that are currently enrolled in our community college system as well. And that level of participation that we have and making sure we have good alignment, but in rethinking this opportunity and being able to shift the work of the council to the committee and think about practices and impact of the work, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity with the committee. I'm excited for it.
I would think that there'd be some type of a report to the entire board after you have your quarterly meetings at the next state board meeting.
I will still also advocate, though, beyond the committee, that I hope we do have funds in the budget for all state board members to be able to attend the community college annual convention. And I know that they're doing some work and thinking about their annual events, but the annual convention is in December. I believe I have those dates. I'll look those up and make sure I have those for my board report. But having the opportunity for everyone to be engaged, at least with that event every year, I think is really important if schedules allow.
We, the inaugural one was this past year. We joined and had strong representation, spoke at the convention. So happy to support participation and board representation as that important. And then just the one other piece to supplement the good conversation is the agenda items that the board continues to have responsibility for, namely budgets in particular, will continue to come before the entire State Board of Education. But will be individual agenda items as opposed to consensus items. And then this committee will be focused on diving more deeply into opportunities and challenges facing the community college system. We've got a number of potential articulated agenda topics, guided pathways, strategic plan, continuous improvement efforts across systems, AI, for example. So we will also look forward to having the opportunity to pull from expertise across all role groups, leading our community college system to advise ultimately the board and the full board.
So at our August, did you say our August meeting will be appointing?
Just the last comment on membership, of course, we will endeavor to recommend individuals who represent as many community colleges across the state as possible.
Thank you, Cass.
Yep, good work. Well, thank you all for supporting, continuing that moving forward.
Publix, Brian?
So I think in an effort to have a more direct relationship with the non-public school advisory committee, we're suggesting that become a committee akin to what the community college group would be to this board. So presently, that group meets, there's, I believe, 5 members. They meet 4 times a year, talk about grant type things for non-public schools, talk a lot about accreditation. If you look at their minutes that are on the website and who the accreditors are, ESAs, obviously. And so I think after doing a little brainstorming that we'd want the experience and expertise of that group on non-public school matters to be shared with the State Board of Education so that we might be able to do our job with more input from knowledgeable folks who would serve on that committee, but also not just have 5 people who don't have a organic relationship to this body. So I was invited to become a member and we'd like to get one more State Board of Education person just to keep me on the straight and narrow. So if anybody's interested in that, I'll be sending you an email with information about that. Still going to meet probably 4 times a year. The meetings but we'll see. They're generally October, December, February, and May. It's kind of in their cycle. They don't necessarily correspond to, back to back when we meet like your group did. There's 40-some thousand students being served in these schools. And I think this will be a great resource to enrich what we need to know to address those issues. And some of us have more knowledge than others because of our backgrounds. So I think we want to retain this. We want to maybe make the membership reflective of, I don't want to say proportional, but there's this many of this religious affiliation. There's this many that maybe don't have a religious affiliation, and make sure all are somehow have a voice on this, in this group. So there's work to do. But we want to keep the name, we want to keep the meeting times. We truly want to make sure it's advisory. It would not be a political legislative kind of group now. It'd be advisory to us. As well to the state board. Anything I'm missing here? I should say. Well, that's where things stand, and I will be, if somebody if you're interested in this, let me know. But I think this will be a good structural, organic connection to the state board.
Will both these committees be reporting at state board meetings, just, I guess, whenever you guys are meeting, since it sounds like you guys are meeting, I guess, on whenever, so the next meeting we have, there will be a report.
That was where I was when we talked about this, that there ought to be a direct sharing of minutes or a report or something.
It might be nice for this one, for non-public. I mean, honestly, I feel horrible saying this, but I have no idea what they do, so. I mean, if they're a committee. of
Unless
ours,
you go look, really, we don't get a report.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe just like a level set, like, at our August meeting, it might be nice just to have like an introduction, here's what they do. Kind of
Well,
thing.
we will know the committee by August, right? Mr. Chair.
This
So,
one way or another.
I mean, I don't know if it's gonna change, and once it becomes a committee, what I highly doubt it, but just, maybe someone could come in and.
Oh, I think there's interest in the people who are already on it to stay. And I just think it'll be a bigger group. I mean, not huge, but just a couple. We want to reserve the right to make sure there's enough representation that we're not just focusing on, just one particular, there's no one religious group that dominates it, or there's no, and that's not to suggest that there was, it's just an example.
Thomas, you have a comment?
In the statutory charge that was repealed for the non-pub advisory council, there was a requirement long ignored to provide reports to the state board. And this is a good time to honor that commitment as a subcommittee of the state board going forward. So what does this group do? Over time, the state board should have known, because the non-pub advisory should have been giving reports and recommendations to the state board. It just never happened. It wasn't part of their institutional culture. And I think there's direction from the state board to fix that.
Yeah, I would anticipate that it would be an agenda item other than a board report over lunch.
Right. I mean, my suggestion would be that it would, right after we do consent agenda, that we have standing committee reports or something like that. And sometimes there may be later agenda items in the meeting related to something that's relevant to that group with some input, but just to inform the board of what's happening at these meetings and what the interests are of the stakeholders in that group and the people to whom they report would be good knowledge to have. Right now, it's very ad hoc in my view.
Yeah, I think one of the considerations too is that once the meeting minutes are approved, is that those are disseminated widely
Agreed.
among other stakeholders across the state.
And just real quick, to Vice President Axiotis at this point, about the charge of the committee, that would obviously be defined by the State Board of Education as a committee of the state board. A starting place was that it shall provide the state board and the Department of Education leaders with a deeper knowledge and understanding of non-public school issues, so that the board might better oversee the accreditation of Iowa's non-public schools and other matters related to non-public schools. So of course, direct accreditation and the approval processes of independent accreditors, which is also a role and responsibility of the board, would be likely agenda topics
Right.
to start with. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Thomas?
I think there's already a model for these types of reports when Dr. Klein gives you updates about the school budget review committee after each of them. It's a standing agenda item. There's a particular rhythm for when they meet, when she gives you updates on their behalf. And I think that would be a suitable structure for both of these. I mean, SBRC is not a subcommittee of the state board, but it has standing meetings and you receive periodic updates. I think that that's a suitable template for structuring board reports from these two subcommittees.
I would agree. The other item that's out there that we have board representation on it was with Brooke with
Iowa PBS.
Iowa PBS. Are you planning on continuing that?
Would you like me to?
If you would.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
We'll officially appoint you if we need to
Okay.
in August. Are there any other loose ends besides what we're talking about here with the aids and commissions and are we covering all the bases we need to cover, I guess?
I believe so, unless there are any additional questions related to the broader update that Eric provided. These are the two entities where we have heard feedback that because the board has direct oversight and roles and responsibilities in these spaces, that a committee to directly advise the board would be beneficial, but also open to hearing any other feedback or questions that you all are hearing from stakeholders related to the boards and commissions legislation.
I guess my only, and I don't know even if this is feasible or possible, but it would be nice to kind of meet because I mean, we have two standing committees of the board, but like, I have no idea who the members are. I mean, you've set up, list of titles or whatever, and I don't even know who serves on this committee, honestly, I have no idea. So it'd be nice just to know or be able to just meet them and just get to know, or just know a little bit about the people who serve on the committee since they are standing committees of the board, that's all. Because I have no idea, like a name, I have no idea who serves on this. I don't know what areas they represent. I have no idea, so.
And the board will, the whole board will review the qualifications and obviously the backgrounds of the appointed members of the committee, but we can certainly explore opportunities for direct engagement with the board from the broader committees. Thank you.
Okay.
President
Cindy?
Robbins or Director Snow, all right, and so I wanted to reiterate, I think what Eric said, so there are 7 voting members of the Board of Education, that correct? Plus our student, plus Iowa Workforce Development, what'll be coming on, so we're 1 down?
Yes.
Verified the number, you are accurate on that. I don't know where you're at with the point.
Yeah.
We will look forward to sharing an update from the governor's office when we have one, and certainly before that August meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry, so in the process right now of someone being appointed on to the board to join us, is that what I heard?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. I know that with this change, it kind of been, and with Mike May rolling off and everything, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything else regarding this discussion? All right, thanks.
I have one other question. The non-public school advisory committee was governor appointed before, but now it would be us, correct?
It's a committee of the board.
Right. So
Yeah.
governor has nothing, they just appoint us.
So all the members who are currently on it will still stay?
I think there was discussion about ensuring representation across the entire non-public school landscape. So I don't know that that's been confirmed, but they're still looking at the membership and believe we'll have an update in August.
How many members are there?
5 members.
5? Okay. Is it going to stay at that number? No.
They'll go up.
Okay.
Well, because I'm going on, somebody else from here, I hope is
Okay.
going on. And there might be a couple of other positions that we were talking about
Mhm.
to make sure the numbers made sense.
Okay.
You wouldn't want everybody from Des Moines, for example.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
That's not the case. You wouldn't want everybody from
Dubuque.
One. Right. He understands. Nor would I want. I can go home.
President Robbins, just a point of order, because this is always a concern of mine prior to each of your meetings. As of July 1, your new quorum is 5 voting members.
Even though we only have 6 members.
Well, you'll have, it's 5 of the authorized seats. It's a quorum, it's 2/3 of the authorized seats. So if there's a vacancy, that still counts towards quorum.
Okay,
So,
that was,
yes,
So 5 of 7 is the quorum, is
yes,
that?
because it's 2/3
Yeah.
and we round up.
Yep.
all righty. Thank you.
Well,
Just heads up, we will move on with Jay, and then we'll be taking a break before we get to item 6 with the National Association for School. Authorities. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you. Someone promote me to be able to present. It'd be helpful.
Yep, hold on. There you go.
All right, thanks. Okay, great. So good morning. Really appreciate, as always, the opportunity to present to the state board. Just a reminder, Jay Pennington, Bureau Chief here at the department. And I'm really excited to show you the latest information for the Iowa Post-Secondary Readiness Reports. So I'm going to be giving you the latest data from the class of 3. Review those state level trends. And then the third bullet, I think, is really exciting. We have new state level data that we're going to be adding to this website over time that really focuses on the apprenticeship opportunities that students are involved in throughout high school, and then certainly as they transition into career. And by the way, please stop me and ask questions. So let's make this interactive. Just as a reminder, this dovetails nicely this topic into the last discussion related to your involvement in the community college board. This is direct data about, what kids are doing after high school. So that state board goal, this is really good information to support that, but also the state board goal to promote equity in education by closing achievement and opportunity gaps. But before I get into the actual data, I just want to provide a little bit of context about why we do this, what the website is, and the collaboration that exists. So the second bullet point focuses on what's called a statewide longitudinal data system. The U.S. Department of Ed has a competitive grant program that provides states funding to be able to build these collaborative efforts and really help support this transition from high school into whatever folks are doing after they complete high school. So we're just finishing a 4-year grant we received from U.S. Department of Ed, $3.7 million over 4 years. So that was a 2019 award. We also received a 2023 award to continue this work. So it's an additional $3.9 million. And the post-secondary readiness reports is just one of a multitude of different outcomes, deliverables that we're working on with these partners, including the Board of Regents, or Division of Community Colleges, Iowa Workforce Development. So these agencies are key into producing the website that I'll show you, but also building out a number of different projects. And just one example that you'll begin to hear more about over the next year is the Iowa E-Transcript Gateway. It's again a collaboration between the department and the Board of Regents and community colleges to help facilitate college enrollment. So we're launching the website. We're in the midst of a pilot. That's just another example of where this funding is going to help these transitions. But the main purpose is really to show you the new data. So the website, the Iowa Post-Secondary Readiness Reports website, provides really good data about college enrollment, persistence, and completion. There's a state level data, which I'll show you here in a minute, but there's also a really set of rich data and robust reports that can provide these data for every district and high school in the state. So we'll just be looking at the state level trends, but Davenport or Des Moines or any district can also use this and localize these trends to see what does that mean for me in my district? How am I doing compared to the state? And then how am I doing with different student groups as well? This is the link. It takes you to the website that was updated this morning. This says June of 2023, but now it says June of 2024. And this just highlights where you would go to see a sort of a written version of what I'm about to present to you. If you were to go to this high school report, that's where you would be able to dig in and sort of localize that data and look at these trends in high school and district. There's a ton of really good data, so I won't be able to get to all of it, but strongly suggest you go and take a look. There's a lot of information here. It's 11 years of trend information, looking at the various classes over time. So just a little bit over a decade to be able to look at 5 different measures. The top line represents what kids are intending to do. So we collect senior year, a exit survey, and they tell us, what they're planning to do. And that represents this top line. So you can see here over the last decade, fewer and fewer high school graduates or those that are about to graduate are planning to go on to some kind of formal college experience, 2-year, 4-year, in-state, out-of-state. The second line represents those that actually go on to enroll within 1 year after leaving high school. And again, you can see there's a decline of about 10 percentage points over the last decade. The next line represents those students that persisted to year 2. So they make it to sophomore year in college. And then the last 2 lines are focused on completion, but looking at 2 different timelines. The bottom line represents those that complete within 4 years of college enrollment. And then this sort of second to last line represents those that complete within 6 years, which is a benchmark that's used by higher ed. 150% of time since you start school, you can see that there's a pretty nice bump between 4-year and 6 years. So, yeah, great.
So in 2001, I was No Child Left Behind. And prior to those years, we had CTE within the districts in the high schools. Is this so this is last 10 years, is this demonstrating students that are matriculating into CTE programs right from high school? Do you know what I mean?
So we have data on the website. You can break out those that are CTE concentrators while in high school. So you can look at that CTE pathway in terms of how it plays out for all of these data points. But I'm not sure I know the CTE program that you're referring to.
I kind of came to the same, maybe conclusion.
I'm not saying
is that the
incorrectly.
pendulum is starting to swing.
Correct, yeah, yeah.
Because there for a while, everybody was supposed to go to a 2-year or 4-year
Yep.
college, everybody.
Yep.
Regardless, and now it's swinging back. That was one of the conclusions I came to. I'm not sure it's how accurate or valid, but.
That's, I guess, was exactly my question. Is that reflective of?
So Jay, with the last 2 lines, are those mutually exclusive students represented?
So this class of 2017 or class of 2019, those are all the same group of students, but looking at different data points for them. So, for the class of 2017, 79% said they were going to go to college.
I meant the very last two lines, the blue line and the red line. Are those mutually exclusive?
No, they're compounded. So in other words, you get a nice jump of 10 percentage points when you go to that 150% or that 6 years. So these are the same set of kids, just looking at a different time frame of when they're completing.
So we have. Okay. All right.
Does that help?
Yep, I got it now.
So this certainly represents challenges, fewer kids are planning to go to college. Fewer kids are actually going to college. However, I think you do see some nice trends here as well. If students can get to sophomore year, the likelihood that they're going to complete is really, really high. So it's that transition, getting them to college, getting them to sophomore year. It doesn't guarantee, but the percentages are really good. And then you can see here, we do see an increase in that 4-year college grad, which is great from a financial perspective, the amount of money you're spending. But then also, over this last 6 years of data, you're seeing a pretty flat line, longer term trends of completion.
But the messaging to our students is you don't have to go to college to be successful in life.
That's not our messaging, but
Not maybe the departments, but within different school districts. I've seen posters on walls in schools that.
yeah. So I'll get into some of the apprenticeship data that kind of gets to some of that, like what other opportunities are really
Right.
valuable that kids are in that can provide, a good living wage beyond high school. The data is clear though, like, from those that do and don't go to college, your lifetime earnings are significantly above with a formal experience. And that's not to say there aren't other good experiences that other people go into, but when you look at it from an economic and financial perspective, college makes a difference.
Absolutely.
I think people also look at, the economics of it, they can
Sure.
graduate from high school, go into a pathway, do like maybe a registered apprenticeship or, have maybe some college courses paid for. And then they can, earn a good wage doing a job and not have the debt, right? Because I think I went to school with some people from law school who are still paying off debt. So yeah, they might earn a lot of money, but a ton of it's going towards paying down student loans. So where's that, your lifelong potential, if you're $150,000, $200,000 in debt, if you have a 2-income household and both of you went to college and graduate school, it's a lot of debt. So I think people are also looking at that and thinking, do I want to be paying off, college or grad school or whatever for the rest of my life as well?
Does the website refine the top line and split 4-year from 2-year?
Yes, you can look at.
My guess is, based on being at a lot of meetings here, is that the 2-year is doing better than the 4-year in terms of enrollment. We saw a report about community colleges, holding their own growing versus 4-year. And even then, state versus Iowa Conference kind of schools.
You can dig in. There's no institution data, but you can look at 4-year versus 2-year with this or any of the other data points.
And I always I don't want to talk about the pandemic, but it looks like the rate of decline steepens with 20.
Yes. And it's nice to see this sort of rebound here in terms of 2-year, but yes, and by the way, a lot of what I'm showing you isn't just an Iowa thing. Like if you look at other state data, this is a national phenomenon.
Okay.
As well. Next, you can look at, and again, disaggregate by student. And the first one, top line really focuses on all kids. And this is fall immediate enrollment, and the last thing was throughout the entire year. So there's some slight difference. And again, you can look at both data points on the website. But I think you do see kind of a couple of interesting things here. So just to, anchor this, you could see here that immediate college enrollment after graduation. So you finish in June and then enroll in August. That's the time period that I'm talking about. You could see here, 58%, and then, for students eligible for free or reduced price lunch at some point during their high school career, there's a 17 percentage point difference. Another thing that I think is really interesting here too, you can take a look at overall 58%, and you can see here that females are going at a larger rate than all kids by 7 percentage points. So again, all of this data is available to be disaggregated. And this just gives you the last 5 years.
Do you look at, ones who already have, who are maybe participated in the joint enrollment program, or ones who took like AP credit courses or anything like that, would that be a higher percentage of them enrolling after they graduate, or?
Yes, and yes, absolutely. So we know that those that, both attain or even take, college level coursework while in high school, enroll and finish at higher rates than those that don't. And we know that those that take the AP exam, also, these numbers go up compared to those that don't do those kinds of things. Yeah.
Sorry, just before you jump into this, I think it was also important to include in this update our registered apprenticeship data. We're also working to include our work-based learning data and our industry recognized credential data as we improve those collection methods or launch those collection methods. And to your point about the message to students, I think the board and the department's message around multiple paths to post-secondary success is very clear. Our prioritization of ICAPs or Iowa Career and Academic Plans beginning in 8th grade, career exploration, beginning at middle school, even elementary school, so that students can make informed choices about their next steps across college and career pathways continues to be a supportive and productive message.
Okay, thank you, Director Stone. So again, this is a new set of information that we're integrating into the report. So just to be clear, this data is just state level information, and later this fall, we'll actually integrate it into the school level reports. The N sizes are relatively small at this time, but you can see here over the 7-year trend that they have grown quite a lot. And to Director Snow's point, like the more that the state focuses on quality, whether it's industry recognized credential or like these high quality and work-based learning experiences along with registered apprenticeships, we expect these trends to continue to increase. So we can see here that for the latest snapshot for the class of 2023, 1.3% of students were engaged in these activities. Now, one other quick thing is this hasn't been deduplicated yet at this point. So you can't just add this 1.3% to the 60% of kids that went to college. So it will be higher than that 60%, but there could be some overlap is my point. And that's what we're working to integrate this fall. So this gives you a sense of the percent of students. Next gives you a sense of what kinds of apprenticeship opportunities kids are engaging in. So so this is the top 10, the top 5 being electrician, teacher aide, nurse assistants, plumber, and welding.
Jay, if I was to look deeper into this particular one, would I find trend data with these on the website?
We haven't, you'll see the data that I'm presenting here. We don't have like trend data around the program titles integrated into the website yet.
Thank you.
We also can disaggregate this information. And I think this tells a really interesting picture. Just, again, caution, these are small end counts, so the picture could change as students increase. But if you remember when we went back to that first year of college enrollment, there were some pretty sizable differences between all kids and students eligible for free or reduced price lunch. I think it was 17 percentage points. However, when you look at this apprenticeship opportunities, you can see that it's pretty close. It's almost nearly identical. So is this sort of creating a different kind of more equitable opportunity that kids are engaging in, where college is much more a much larger gap. So that's, I think, a really interesting thing here. Another thing that is interesting that I just want to point out too is just again, while these are small, you can see there's a pretty large difference in the number of female students engaging in these opportunities between, the class of 22 and 23. And you can see that males also tend to be above the state average. So as we get more data, as more kids go into these opportunities, I'm really interested to see how this picture changes and or does it? Does it stay similar to what we're seeing here today? So I know that was rapid fire. What other questions do you have?
I like the direction you're taking because you can't really make good decisions about the future without the data, right? And what the trends are and how to redirect trends if that's the goal of the department or whatever. So I really appreciate this. I love Tableau. I love the dynamics of just clicking into something and then having it blossom into a lot of other information that was harder to get years ago. So thank you for your work and your department's work on providing this information and expanding it to include what you said earlier, Director Snell.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Jay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, we will be on break until 11:30. All right, we have next item on the agenda is item 8, National Association of Charter School Authorizers, NACSA. We have a guest presenter. We have Heather with us.
Zoom with everyone.
So I can share my screen. Let's see. Okay, everybody's able to see that okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, all right. So we are here today for about an hour together. I'm going to provide a session on an overview of the charter authorizing life cycle. There is a lot of content here. I've tried to be mindful of time, but there often are follow-up questions or requests for examples or resources that I might reference throughout this presentation. So folks can either just jot questions down, email me later on. I'm more than happy to connect folks with further learning opportunities after our time here today. So one thing that I like to start off with whenever we're presenting, not only is who I am, I'm the VP of Consulting Services for NACSA, which means on a day-to-day basis, I'm in contact with between 20 to 25 different states, supporting authorizing through practice and policy improvements from very, very small to very, very large scale projects. But more importantly, the organization of NACSA, for those of you that are not yet familiar, We're a nonprofit, historically headquartered in Chicago, but now we are a fully virtual organization of about 18 staff members from California to Maine. So we have folks in lots of different contexts. Lots of us have direct education, K-12, higher ed, and authorizing experience. And all of our supports from the consulting end to the advocacy end to our fiscal division are all united under this common mission, where we purposely work specifically with authorizers as our chosen lever in the educational ecosystem to provide better and more choices for students and families, especially those that have been historically under-resourced. So our three principles that really guide all of our work, these three core beliefs you see on the bottom of the screen here, is around access, autonomy, and accountability. So as if you have read some of NACS's sort of, published canon that really, sort of articulates our core beliefs and the core principles and standards that undergirds all of our work, you'll see those three principles centered and embedded and threaded throughout. So hopefully you will see that also in our conversation today. So our agenda today is at once, it's about an inch deep and a mile wide. So this, what you see here is a visual representation of the authorizing life cycle, and also very much mirrored in the principles and standards that I just mentioned. So in the interest of time, we're going to be focusing on sections 2 through 4 of the life cycle today. So we're going to kick off talking about application process and how, applications become schools, and then how that kicks off the cycle of establishing expectations, memorializing those in contracts, how you oversee and evaluate schools to see how they're performing and if they're meeting expectations over the course of their terms. And then towards the end of that term, making decisions to see which schools have or have not earned the right to continue serving students. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the application process and decision-making, all of those components, and the sort of exemplary process that NACSA encourages folks to follow. In each of these buckets of the authorizer lifecycle, I am going to differentiate where applicable, where the responsibilities and the tasks associated with day-to-day authorizing staff, which in your case could be Department of Ed staff and liaisons, and then that of the board members as decision makers. So I will say from this very onset of this training, it is really important that all board members understand the levels of scrutiny and the levels of intricacy and all of the information that is collected and analyzed at each stage of this process to ultimately have hopefully a high degree of confidence in the recommendations that are being passed up to the board. So the board, if at any stage does feel that they need more information or a different format of information from the staff at the Department of Education, that is definitely a conversation that you should have, because ultimately the board needs to be, fully informed so that they can be objective and impartial, but obviously making really high stakes decisions at a number of key points over the charter life cycle. So the new application process, and I speak from experience because this is work that I led directly here in my home state, is a really optimistic and exciting, but also very intimidating part of the life cycle. But when this is done with really high attention and scrutiny to detail and rigor, as well as transparency, it is highly important to identifying which groups have the current capacity, the skill, will, and the resources to operate high quality schools that are going to serve your communities well. So the idea here is, this entire process is designed to figure out who, deserves to be handed the keys to school buildings that can have a tremendous impact, hopefully positive, tremendous impact on students. So you may hear often, or I've heard often, applicant groups that want to start a school, whether or not they're a charter management organization or something homegrown, or, a group of teachers that think that they could do, just do a different model that suits families better. There's often language that is used around, I have an idea for a school, I have the best idea for a school. And I think this is one of those instances where terminology really matters, because ideas don't become schools. Evidence-based, comprehensive, and practical plans become schools. So anybody that is interested in potentially earning a charter has to apply to an authorizer through an established process. Typically, that's called an RFP, or request for proposals. More rigorous and selective process have a greater likelihood of producing successful schools. That does not mean that your request for proposals has to be 100 pages, or that, you know, every applicant group has to spend 5 years developing a plan that is 5,000 pages long. However, it just means that you do need to be demanding and exacting and transparent in terms of what your expectations are for folks to demonstrate their capacity to do this. As demanding as the charter application process is, both for the applicants as well as for the authorizer review team in Iowa, very demanding, long nights, lots of reading, lots of analysis, always lots more questions to ask no matter what. It is the easiest part of opening and operating a school. And I've heard this time and time again from folks that really felt that the new application process was, you know, rings of increasing size and increasing levels of flame and fire. But then when they actually get into the hard work of operating schools that are responsive to student needs, they realize that the pressure that authorizers put them through really did help them grow and also identify what likely obstacles and challenges would be. So all that to say, keep your standards high. Here we see the core elements of a quality application process. So you see this is quite a lengthy pathway or runway where aspiring school founders are, you know, going through multiple levels of information gathering and solicitation and analysis. So most of what you see on the screen here are largely going to be responsibilities and activities that are led and undertaken by the authorizing staff, the sort of day-to-day field staff, if you will, that work on behalf of the board to make sure that you have the information that you need. So we see, you know, obviously, as I mentioned before, you know, there needs to be the submission of a formal application. The authorizing staff will also determine, you know, that group's eligibility to potentially be authorized. They will also do a completeness check. And this might sound like a practical nuisance, but with the amount of information and the interdependencies of things like budget and attachments and narrative and all of these things, it is relatively common for something to be missing. Then the team of internal and external reviewers will evaluate that application. And I'll talk a little bit more about the ideal composition of what that review team should look like and why that balance of internal versus external staff why that's really key. You'll note at this stage, the board members, other than being informed about, you know, perhaps who has applied, whose applications are complete, who's moving forward into that phase of full evaluative review, they're not the ones reading these applications. They're not doing this analysis firsthand. So through this process, the authorizer, the review team, collects and analyzes feedback from multiple reviewers. A best practice that NACSA encourages, and we have developed and disseminated quite a few resources around this to help authorizers implement this practice sufficiently, is a capacity interview, which we'll talk a little bit about in a few slides. It's a face-to-face in-person or face-to-face virtual opportunity to have sort of more candid discourse with the applicant group and another opportunity to ask more questions. Because as I said before, your RFP could be really rigorous and robust. The complicated and sophisticated nature of a school model, which is also a business and all of these other components, there's always things that, you know, folks really want to dig into to understand better, even if that's something like the personal backgrounds or the professional backgrounds of the applicant teams, just to see where those strengths and weaknesses lie. Ultimately, you know, the ratings and the feedback and the additional information that was gleaned through that capacity interview All of that is rolled up ultimately into a recommendation report for either for charter approval or charter denial. And that is really the meatiest, most substantive piece of information that the authorizing review panel will present to the board, as well as, some sort of presentation, opportunity to ask questions, just making sure that folks really have the level of information and again, confidence needed to vote in the affirmative or not. That is really where all of that entire body of information is distilled and curated to support an evidence-based recommendation. So going to go just at a very high level around what typically an RFP entails. Definitely want to know lots about the educational program, the design of it, how that was determined, what else was considered, and how that's going to meet the needs of, the target student population or the geography or, whatever the targeted student enrollment is, to know that this is not just going to be an additional choice option, but it's going to be an option that's in demand, that is enrolled, and that's meeting a specific need. Operations plan and capacity, as well as board governance, for the group to actually oversee and manage that school is also, critically important, as well as the financial planning and financial management to show that this is going to be a sustainable and viable entity. That's also a good sound use of public dollars. So the review panel that is comprised to look at each of these different components obviously needs to have a very varied skill set. It is rare to find folks, even within the Department of Education or within other charters or other school systems or institutions of higher education, that has true expertise across K-12, as well as finance, as well as operations and governance and all of those things. And trying to find those unicorns rather than building a team of perhaps 3 to 4 to 7, depending on the specialized nature of that application, typically becomes a capacity concern. So bringing in external folks that again maybe have some of that expertise, especially around a particular model, Montessori, career technical education, STEM, there's lots of specialized models that are really, really great additions to a charter portfolio, that it is really smart to go to subject matter experts in those things so they can assess those parts of the application, as well as sort of just building the knowledge base of all the other reviewers on the team. So this is also a really great professional development opportunity if you can build that team that's really sort of cross-disciplinary. Other reasons why a review panel that is comprised not only of sort of the internal authorizer staff, as well as some of these external experts, is because external experts are could be more objective. They boost the rigor and the integrity of the process because these are folks that don't have, generally don't have personal connections to applicant groups or, maybe as many geographic ties, as well as the reputation of the entire process. Because the more, as with everything else, the more rigorous something is, the more transparent and normed and unbiased it needs to be so that folks see that this is, an impartial process, but that is also predictable in the standards needed to be authorized in your state. So thinking about the actual review of applications, and again, here, this is largely responsibilities, and the burden of most of this work at this point is on the day-to-day authorizing staff. Some components of this application need to be looked at under a microscope, like the budget and the staffing plan, to really know exactly where every penny is going to go, so that folks can understand how practical that is, if resources are being deployed in ways that make sense and align with the model as is described. And there's other pieces that you're going to be using more of sort of binoculars, things that are, that are best estimates, especially if a school is going to ultimately be a K-6 or more grades, looking down the road and trying to predict using external validation, research, other pieces Not a shot in the dark by any means, but some of these are longer range predictions, based on research and evidence of what will likely serve this school community well. So there is sort of a balance as to the sort of nitty gritty of what needs to be in place and what folks can assess, for practicality and feasibility in the immediate sense, where some of these other components of a school design aren't tangible at the application stage. The universal look-fors, and this is what board members should also, be assuming are true, especially when if there's a recommendation for charter approval. For any strong charter application, you're looking for sufficient detail. Again, not a set of ideas, not a story. We're looking more for a blueprint for what the school is going to look like, feel like, what it's going to do for kids and families on day 1, on day 100, on day 300. Also looking for an internal alignment. When I first started off in authorizing in very similar work I was managing the new applications process, one of the best pieces of advice I was given on day 1 was to take the budget and then take the instructional plan and look at those side by side to make sure the priorities that were identified in one carry through into the other. So that's one example of where internal alignment, within an application is really important, but there are certainly others. Staffing needs to match, data pulled from, the community and other sources around, demand and prioritized models and all of these things. What a group is proposing to do should be very much in sync with what a community needs and what they've, provided feedback on what they need. External validation. We are all in education. There is a wealth of information that is out there. We don't need to recreate the wheel all the time. So especially around things like curricular choices or, different types of instructional methodology, especially if somebody is proposing something that's outside of the norm, which you hope from time to time folks are doing that, because this is not just to add choices. This is to add high quality and diverse choices for students and families to choose from. They should support that, with academic and research base to show that it has been successful in places, to give you confidence that it will be successful at this proposed school. So review panelists, internal and external, both are, tasked with rating, a number of different responses, questions, attachments. They have to see what is lacking, what meets expectations, what approaches expectations. And they're also using the feedback from that review to inform capacity interview questions, to probe around some of those areas that could move, potentially this recommendation from a no to a yes. Or sometimes it happens in the inverse as well, which is why, walk into this process really very open to collecting just information from all sources, briefing documents for decision makers and other staff members that are not, not intricately involved, as well as this last one. Sometimes this gets a bit forgotten, but we do want to honor the work that applicant groups are doing, even if their plans or their submission or, when they do the face-to-face interview, there's just doubts that cannot be overcome. Perhaps this group is not ready. Maybe they don't have, staff or sufficient board members with all of the skill sets that are necessary to oversee a charter school effectively. Ultimately, at the end of the day, those deficiencies should be articulated and shared with that applicant group, again, to honor the work that they have done. Because even if the submission is not as strong as you would wish it to be to approve it in this cycle, generally still represents an incredible amount of work and passion and commitment on behalf of those groups. So it is only fair to share feedback with them so that they can use that in their own internal reflection process. Should they, go back to the drawing board, try to supplement their application and submit in a latter cycle. So I've mentioned this a couple of times. The capacity interview is usually the best and often the only in-person opportunity that you can get as a group to ask applicants direct questions about their application. Again, this is most typically, although not always, I would say most typically, it's the review team from the authorizing office that is conducting this capacity interview. In some geographies, sometimes board members will sort of take a sort of a fishbowl approach and will observe it, or will record the proceeding if everybody's okay with that, and then, you know, sort of watch it later on. In some cases, board members do, you know, participate directly. I would say at the end of the day, if you're able to remain impartial, then I think any of those things could work. The basics of how this time is used, typically it's anywhere between 60 to 120 minutes per group. I would set the same amount of time per group to keep this sort of equitable. The authorizer review team leads the questions and takes notes. In terms of who should participate from the applicant group side, if there's a leader identified, if there's a partner organization identified, definitely should have those people in the room. Proposed board members should definitely be there and should be leading the discussion. But if there were consultants that played a significant role in the drafting and the putting together of this application, but that will not be working at the school or will not have a significant ongoing role at that school if approved, would not have those folks attend, because you're being very intent on measuring the capacity of the group, not just people that they hired to help them put the plan together. So what the authorizing staff here needs to accomplish, and this is really true across this process as described so far, right? Through that submission at the very beginning, through the analysis, through that interview, and then ultimately to figure out what the appropriate recommendation is. Is the proposed ed program sound? Are plans sufficiently comprehensive and cohesive, right? Remember, blueprint, not idea. Even if those two things are answered yes, are these the right people to do this successfully? And lastly, but not least, does the proposed model fit an identified need in the proposed community? And all of those things, if you can answer, if the review panel as a whole, as a collective, can answer all four of those questions yes, then most times the recommendation to the board is going to be for approval. Why is this so important? Especially because I'm cognizant that whenever I describe it, this sounds probably very, very burdensome, not only on people that, you know, maybe want to take a chance and, you know, pursue a charter, as well as on your Department of Education staff, and even as decision makers. This, depending on how many applications, you know, you are reviewing at one time and how many decisions come before you, we are talking about there's a tremendous amount of information and analysis that is inherent in this process. So why is it so important, and why does NACSA, you know, sort of keep on putting so many resources and training and, you know, so many best practices in this area? It's because it really does reduce school closure rates, particularly early on in the charter term. Unfortunately, first-year school closures are not unheard of. It's not terribly common, it's a few percent, but we never want to see this happen. So again, a rigorous process up front can catch a lot of these potential challenges, or at least mitigate them, so that you're not approving folks to open schools that could ultimately be destabilizing to your community, which is obviously nothing that we ever want to do. So low enrollment, fiscal distress, you know, gets to really that, you know, feasibility planning with the finances and that analysis, making sure the facilities are, you know, are suitable and, you know, legal and all of those things. Management organization relationships, either with what they're charging or what services are or are not being provided, as well as policy and operational decision making. So a strong RFP and a strong review process is never going to be 100% guarantee that all of your schools will be perfect forever and forever, because we're all human. But it does go a very far way to ensuring that your schools are as strong as they could possibly be from day one, and hopefully thereafter. So any questions about any of that anybody would want to raise in this moment? Or you can kind of hold them to the end or hold them, and then we could also connect offline.
You were talking about an internal and external review.
Yes.
At the DE, we have the DE staff being the internal review. Is that it?
Correct. So we have a robust internal review process that reflects all the folks in this room across
Okay.
finance, legal, school improvement, special ed, early childhood, CTE, and more. One barrier to external reviewers is potential stipends. So that's something for the board to talk about.
Okay. Another follow-up. Heather, there are some states that require charter schools to work with a charter school authorizer. Is that common where other states require that, or is that, I know Minnesota does, or they did when I worked up there a little bit.
Can you rephrase the question? So so the applicant groups are working with an authorizer. Do you mean like prior to submitting an application?
Prior to and ongoing.
So I think it's not uncommon for an applicant to be in touch with the authorizer prior to submitting. I think, any relationship building at any stage can be really helpful, especially if it helps folks understand what the requirements are, what the authorizer is really looking for, if the authorizer has certain prioritized models or geographies that they're really looking for schools, to open within. I think extra communication is always good. Do I think it's required? Not necessarily, but then I think it also pushes additional responsibility on the authorizer to be very, very clear about expectations and timeframes and process and things like that. If I can go back to the point that was made earlier about, I'm not sure that I heard it fully, but I think it was around limited funds to pay stipends for external reviewers. I can't swear to it, but I have heard that there are folks that will do this on a volunteer basis, especially if there are, advocates or school leaders or other folks that are, sort of very passionate advocates for the charter sector as a whole. So it might not be the easiest thing in the world, especially, based on how many applications you need reviewed and things like that. But I wouldn't completely think it was impossible to just pull in a few external folks to add some of that objectivity, or add, if there are specialized skill sets that are needed from time to time, just because you are limited in your ability to pay those folks. Because we used folks who were reviewers that actually were, state ed employees from other locations that were barred from accepting a stipend, and they still did it. Just for free. Because sometimes it's really, really interesting. You meet really smart folks from other sort of, lanes in education, and it's really great PD.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, moving on into performance contracting. So once you have authorized, your new charter, it is important to consider how you're going to hold them accountable and what your theory of action is that, really kind of the foundation of your expectations and where those live. So you will often hear folks at NACSA and just folks in the national charter sector often talk about the Autonomy for Accountability Exchange, also known as the charter bargain. So this is something that we try to maintain a very healthy and very even balance between these two concepts. And the way that NACSA defines these for purposes of this conversation is autonomy in terms of school operators' control or freedom to deploy as they see necessary, time, talent, and resources. On the other hand, we have, the concept of accountability, which is really performance, right? Have schools demonstrated successful performance relative to the goals and measures and metrics that are set out in their contracts or frameworks in not only the area of academic performance, but also organizational, operational, and fiscal. So really, folks need to check all of those boxes, or at least show really, progressive progress towards, strong performance in each of these 3 areas in order to keep on getting that autonomy and freedom to develop their and implement their own program. So this concept is very much embedded throughout our discussions of frameworks, contracts, and expectations. So the contract, between the operator and the board and the authorizer is really the backbone of this entire enterprise. So what is included in that contract and what's memorialized in terms of performance is really important. That contract really memorializes the terms of the deal. So throughout that charter application process that we just talked about, that's all about aspirations, theories, plans, of what the school can be and what they hope to be. The contract defines, practically speaking, what the authorizer expects it to be, on what time frame, and how they're going to measure, measure that progress. So it shifts from aspiration to practice. So I'm not going to read everything on this slide to you all, and you all will also get a copy of this presentation. But here are some of the elements that strong contracts are going to do. I will say in most geographies, to reduce the amount of lift, especially as your portfolio grows, this body of work can, becomes exponentially larger. A lot of authorizers will start from a standardized strong contract template, and then, do some negotiation and some customization based on, specific details for each additional school. But generally speaking, obviously, federal laws as well as state laws and regulations that all schools, not only charters, are still expected to comply with, will also be enumerated, in that contract template. And here's things that are a little bit more charter specific. So we've underlined here material components, because as we talked about in that charter application, the amount of information and plans and policies and things that go into the design and the planning for a school model are tremendous. Some of those things are really core to the school that you have approved, and that you would not want those to be able to be changed without authorizer approval or acceptance or permission. We would consider those components of the application to be material. So things like the school's mission, where they're going to be located, an educational program, especially if it's specialized. Like, for example, if somebody proposes and provides you with a submission that talks all about a bilingual program to be in a certain neighborhood in your state, that is the program you approved. That's the program that you want to see offered to students. You don't want that school to just switch overnight and decide, oh, we're going to be a Project Lead the Way school instead. We're not doing bilingual anymore. So those pieces that are material that you want to hold that school accountable for without their autonomy to change those things without asking you first, those things also need to be baked into that contract. So things like enrollment policy, projections, the governance structure, their bylaws, obviously compliance with open meetings law, assurances for compliance with students for programming for students with disabilities, English learners, etc. And if there are any articulated agreements with third-party organizations, all of those things should definitely be baked into that contract. Lots of other things that are smaller, more detailed, that could be, in flux or evolving over the life of that school. Those should be left to the school's autonomy to make those decisions in a more agile way without having to ask the authorizer for permission for each of those things. One example of something that a school should probably have the authority to do without needing to, to discuss with the authorizer, changing the assessment calendar from year to year. I mean, there's lots of reasons, that a school might need to shift those things without fundamentally adjusting a material component of the ed program. You don't want them to bother you with that, and they don't really want to bother you with that either. So there's definitely a balance between, the level of detail to be included in that contract. But details certainly should include the length of the charter term, as well as provide guidance or, outline the process through which the authorizer will ultimately make a renewal decision, when that contract is going to be, it's going to run out, any circumstances that could warrant revocation, and what happens in the event of a school closure to things like assets, in terms of financial assets, as well as, sort of, hard assets and physical assets at the school facility. And we have examples of model contracts that NACSA has done. That's sort of a universal one, as well as many others in other contexts. So if this is something that folks would like to see some more examples of what is included and what is not, I'm happy to connect you with those things. So I've used the phrase performance framework several times now. This is really the standards that are including the goals that are quantifiable, attainable, measurable, not only at renewal, at the end of that 4 or 5 year term, but really across the life cycle of the charter school. You don't want to only know how your school is performing years into this experience for families and years into the expense of public dollars to fund this school. So there are academic, financial, and organizational performance measures that are, again, rather standardized. Definitely will be standardized to whatever your state assessment system, currently is. But we have very robust resources that provide lots of different options and also explain why a lot of these measures, especially around finance and organizational performance, are really necessary to just providing an on-the-go health check, of each of your schools. In each of these areas, the framework basically asks, academic, is the ed program a success? And how do you know? Financial performance, is the school viable? And how do we know? Organization, is it an effective and well-run organization? And how do we know? So how we know is through the adoption of a public, document that, really articulates each of those performance management components. It provides an objective, transparent, and sort of evolving framework that applies to a school from its first day of operation to its last. Obviously, would not expect to see the same level of performance from, the first to the last day, but by providing something, that is very consistent, also allows schools to, evaluate themselves so that there's no surprises around what they feel their authorizer considers of their performance. And as well as, identifying what performance is being measured and what isn't protects school autonomy. Because from time to time, authorizers might get really interested or start digging into other things, to try to figure out, how a school is doing. And remember, autonomy versus accountability. If schools are generally doing well, we should give them the freedom and the space to keep on doing well. Here are some of the buckets that are typically measured in performance framework. This is not the goals. I could send you a 100-page document with, it's almost a catalog of all different types of goals, measures, and metrics. But this just gives you sort of a taste of, in each of these categories of the frameworks, these are typically the things that are prioritized. So in academic, student achievement, student growth, progress over time, depending on the grade span of the school that you're talking about. It could be post-secondary and career readiness for high schools, compliance and meeting state and federal accountability guidelines. For the organization, is the education program, is it being delivered and implemented in the way that school had promised and that, is outlined in their contract? Are they following sound governance practices and, adhering to reporting deadlines? Financial management, do we have, folks with the appropriate, capacity and credentials to make sure that not only is money being spent well, but that it's also being managed and overseen well? Are student and employee rights being upheld? Does the school have a healthy culture and climate? Are attendance rates and student retention and staff retention, all of those things, are those all positive? As well as kind of the standard financial measures around the near-term health and viability of the school, as well as long-term, is the school in a positive place? So in addition to those pretty standardized measures that we see, most authorizers in most states have adopted something very similar, if not very, very similar to that. What we're seeing at NACSM, what's the topic of a lot of conversation, especially in the last couple of years, but gaining momentum, is supplementing traditional performance framework measures with things that schools are identifying and codifying themselves, particularly where a school maybe has a specialized or maybe non-traditional mission. I referenced before, I think an easy example here is a bilingual program. So maybe the mission of the school is that students, in addition to, becoming adept with literacy, numeracy, curriculum standards based achievement, they also want students to be as fluent in French as they are in English. So in that instance, it makes sense, perhaps for them to add additional measures that measure student fluency to know how well the school is providing, that value add and how well the school is meeting that particular mission. Otherwise, in the traditional performance framework, there aren't a lot or really any goals around second language acquisition, but certainly makes sense with that type of a program. So lots of authorizers are encouraging schools to figure out, what assessment or instrument is a reliable and valid measure, for something like language fluency. Doesn't have to be just language, there's also schools that are, really leading a charge to increase social emotional learning, or schools that are career and technical education or STEM. So they're really pushing micro credentials or other types of things. Anything that is a little out of the norm and it is not currently captured in the existing framework could be added in to show the additional ways that these schools are being successful and the additional value that they are adding to the student experience. Again, just like with any other type of targets, want them to be ambitious, but also achievable. And for most goals, want to really focus on input rather than outputs. For example, some schools find that volunteering or internships or externships are, a really important part of their educational experience. For the goal to be something like, 75% of students will participate in an internship, that's an input because it doesn't guarantee any particular outcome. So when we encourage folks to focus on outputs and outcomes, what have the students learned or gleaned or experienced, or what is the ultimate, what's the ultimate value of that type of experience? So some of the, the stickier parts of this conversation that I don't think everybody has figured out yet, so it's still an ongoing question, is if a school like my bilingual English-French school, if the performance around language acquisition is strong, but perhaps the other academic performance is not as strong, or the inverse happens. Kids are really doing super well on state assessments around English and math, but not in French. How do we ultimately hold schools accountable, or how do we weight those things relative to the traditional measures? So interesting conversation that's happening. Folks are kind of taking it in several different directions. So if this is something that's, sounds interesting, or if folks would like to continue discussing, can certainly loop you into some of those conversations and cohorts that are really focused on this. Okay, any questions about performance expectations and contracting? Okay, hearing none and watching the clock, I'm going to keep on moving. So once your schools have been approved, once you have identified and codified those performance expectations in their contract agreements, and schools and everybody's on the same page about what they're supposed to be doing, how do you measure it between opening and renewal to make sure that things are going on the right track? So here are the monitoring tools. Again, this is largely, if not exclusively, the purview of the day-to-day authorizing staff. But of course, the letters, memos, reports that are generated subsequent to these monitoring tools should definitely be made available to board members to keep everybody informed so that there's no surprises. So key monitoring tools are the pre-opening checklist, because even when you put applicant groups through that rigorous and, multifaceted evaluation process at the beginning, still need to monitor them to make sure that everything is happening in place for a strong opening on day one. And there's a protocol and checklist for that. Reporting timelines, we're going to talk about, how you communicate that to schools, because there's a lot of information that's being demanded of school operators, not only from the department, but from multiple different sources. So you want to try to save them some headaches if you can. Desk audits is information that's either collected through public sources or submitted from the schools themselves that you can evaluate off-site. Site visits are exactly what they sound like. It's on-site, more qualitatively oriented information gathering. And annual reports, which is, sort of a temperature check at the end of each year to let the school as well as the community at large know how that school is performing compared to its expectations. So once that charter is awarded, authorizers should monitor that activity and ultimately determine if the school is adequately prepared to open and serve students. As I said before, we're really, we advocate for clarity and transparency so that all parties know when required its information is due, and in a format that is hopefully not burdensome on the school. Wherever possible, authorizers should not ask for, the same information in multiple formats or multiple times per year. We want to maintain schools' attention on teaching and learning as much as possible. Even though, of course, there is a lot of reporting and information that is due to the authorizer, always want to err on the side of reducing burdens on them wherever possible. So as I mentioned, desk audits are, this is a useful strategy for looking at the self-reported data that schools have to submit. This is not an inclusive list by any means, but here's, four big buckets of key information. So enrollment over the course of the year, testing results, obviously, financial audits to show, quarterly compliance and to show that, the balance and things are all positive, and board meeting minutes, so that, wherever necessary, or you can kind of spot check this or randomize it, the authorizing staff can just check in to see what the level of oversight is, what the level of scrutiny is, and if there are any emergent issues at the board level that the authorizer should be aware of before they, sort of spiral into a really serious situation. Talking about looking at the self-reported data from schools, especially things like enrollment, we often say that comparison is the authorizer superpower. So, and especially when you want to disaggregate data to see if there are any, instances where there might just be an issue that needs to be addressed, or a question that needs to be raised to the board or to the school leadership, which is really where that sort of open and transparent communication comes in. So things like enrollment, students and families are mobile. We know that. So that in its own, in its own self, if students are, if there's a rate of attrition over the course of the year, if it's not egregious in terms of maybe more than 15% or so, might not raise eyebrows. But if there's the ability to disaggregate that enrollment data over the course of the year, to pay attention to see if there are certain subgroups of students maybe that are leaving more or less often, if there are spikes in mid-year mobility, which might be an outlier. Looking at things also like discipline data. Are there lots of students being suspended? Is it the same students that are being suspended? If we look at those by subgroup or by gender, are there trends that perhaps should be followed up upon, as well as expulsion and other types of, achievement and graduation data. So we say, proportionality is a proxy for equity. Just because you notice, something that might look a little odd, definitely begs the conversation. Doesn't mean, anything, anything untoward is happening, but better to know and raise that question before it becomes an issue. So site visits, typically authorizers will visit schools on site, once or twice at least over the charter term. That does not mean every school every year. This is one of those things that kind of goes back to the balance of autonomy and accountability. If a school is, completing reporting requirements, seems to be achieving goals in the way that you would expect, and is, generally high performing and not problematic, generally say leave them alone, at least until renewal. Renewal is definitely a part of the charter term where a site visit does generate great qualitative data to add to that record, that to support, whatever that renewal recommendation will be. After every site visit, authorizing staff should prevent a written report of findings. It could be all of the ways that the school is meeting expectations and what they should keep on doing, or, just a reflection of what great things are happening at the school, or, where there are areas of deficiency. That should definitely be clearly called out so the school knows that's areas that they should focus on. But authorizing staff members as well as board members should never prescribe action steps. Should never, oh, your math instruction is weak, try this curriculum. That is the area where you'd be sacrificing your impartiality and objectivity. So authorizers and board members, the appropriate lane here is to hold up a mirror and reflect back what you're seeing or what you've measured or what you've evaluated, not tell the school how to fix it. That's within their own autonomy to figure out how to do that. Annual reports are, just like it says in the box, it's an annual assessment and a written codification of the school's progress over the course of that year. Depending on the capacity at the authorizer staff level, this can be accomplished in sort of two ways. One is that the authorizing team itself is the one that gathers that information, does that analysis, drafts and disseminates that report to the school, or some authorizers that just, have a smaller team and a larger portfolio find it easier from a capacity perspective to ask the schools to self-report and self-evaluate against their goals for the year and submit that report to them, and then they kind of maybe do fact check it and provide corrections if necessary. Either way, you can still really accomplish the same goals for annual reporting. And these three reasons are really, really why this is worth the time investment. Lets the school know how it's doing relative, especially to renewal standards, makes that information publicly available, which provides transparency. And then again, identifies strengths and weaknesses so that schools can know what to keep doing, what to stop doing, how to build upon that. Gonna keep going and try to save a minute or two at the end here for questions. So renewal decision-making, charters do not exist into perpetuity. So typically at about every 5 years is the standard for an initial charter term, schools have to affirmatively act and apply for renewal to continue operating. Similarly to the request for proposals for new charters, authorizers should have an established and published formal renewal application that, schools that is predictable. They know what time of year it's available, what time of year they have to submit it. Again, no surprises at renewal. Surprises at renewal are not generally a good thing. The annual reports or some other type of cumulative performance report should be provided to that school so that everybody's on the same page. If there is, it's not uncommon for there to be, some kind of discrepancy or misunderstanding about, what data says around the school's performance. Annual reports and that ongoing communication with the school over the course of the charter term can be really effective in combating that. But if it's for some reason that conversation doesn't take place until the school applies for renewal, it's still a good opportunity to do that. And ultimately, the authorizer is responsible for making decisions based on merit, based on already the school's track record of performance and objective evidence, not promises of future improvements, future hires, new curriculum, all of those things. The best indicators of future improvement is past performance. So here is how the main activities of a standardized renewal process works. That looking at that body of evidence of school performance over the entire, 5 years. The renewal application and the site visit, additional information, both quantitative and qualitative, that's provided there. That, works its way into a renewal recommendation based on that body of evidence that goes to the board. Often a board can choose, or sometimes it's statutorily required, that the board can offer a public hearing, consistent with your state law, to allow public voice and community voice to weigh in about, perhaps what the school has done for, for their students, what the school has not done for the students, provides more input, especially, to really engage that community and provide them with opportunities to be heard and considered in this process. And then ultimately that is all dealt with through a renewal decision vote by the board members. So wanted to reiterate this because it is really important. Public opinion can be very, very strong in instances of renewal, especially if a school might be very beloved in its community, but maybe has not met the expectations set by its authorizer. These can be really sticky situations and conversations, because you do want to honor, the voices and the priorities of the community. But if the body of data does not support promises of future improvement, it's important to hold schools accountable and be transparent and consistent in doing that across your portfolio. Here are the typical types of renewal decisions. So a full term is whatever is outlined in your contract. It's typically 5 years. Short term is fewer than 5. Best practice is not to do a short term renewal of fewer than 2 years, because that's just really, it's too brief of a time span for a school operator to really show tremendous growth or to put tremendous, transformation processes in place. So if a school hasn't earned at least 2 years, I think the conversation truly is, have they earned renewal at all? But full term and short term renewal terms can have or not have conditions, which could be, around certain financial parameters, around enrollment, can be very specific things that are achievable on a short time frame. There's closure, which is not including surrender. Closure is when a school just, for whatever combination of circumstances across the performance expectations, they just have not hit the mark. And then there is revocation, which we'll talk about, which is really extreme, severe, often safety related situations where the school should be closed immediately. So here's just we've always found this to be a powerful quote from one of NACSA's resources around closure and around that it's emotionally, it is intellectually, it's very difficult, but that in certain situations, making the tough decisions in the best interest of kids is part of the job of being an authorizer. So just realizing how difficult it can be, but really understanding also that it's part of that responsibility in the job description in some instances. As I mentioned before, revocation is not synonymous with closure. Revocation is something that's thankfully very, very rare, because I think school operators as well as authorizers, if everybody is doing their level best and paying attention and monitoring all the same things, these type of extreme underperformance or public safety or just pure financial mismanagement is relatively rare, but there are some of those instances where the environment is just not sustainable or it's not safe for students, so that closure should be implemented immediately. Okay. All right, I'm looking at the clock. I think we're 30 seconds over, so I do apologize for that. But I'm just going to leave you here with this last slide. This is a synopsis really of the responsibilities that I would say at this point, now that we've discussed, most of the life cycle of charters, these are responsibilities that are shared between the day-to-day authorizing staff as well as the decision makers. But, looking through this and kind of parsing through, I think you can probably have a sense now of where the information collection, the analysis, you know, the write-ups, all of those things, where that responsibility lies with the authorizing staff. And then ultimately, you know, sort of strategic and high stakes decision-making is done by the board, but everybody is working towards these same principles and standards, right? So we all want to maintain high standards of quality, all want to uphold and protect school autonomy, as well as ultimately, you know, all of this is to protect the student in the public interest and provide higher quality choices than perhaps those students would have access to, you know, outside of the charter system. Okay. I can hang on, but I know you guys have a full agenda. So if there are any burning questions that somebody would like to voice right now, or feel free to email me. Happy to connect or answer questions offline or send resources. And I can also send information about our upcoming conference in October in Houston, Texas. Awesome, great learning opportunity, especially with the opportunity to connect with 500 of your other authorizer friends that are all have similar questions, similar challenges, but also hopefully excited about the same opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather at this point? Thank you again. We all have her email address, so
Great. Okay.
don't be surprised if you get a
I
email
will not
coming
be.
your
All
way.
right. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for your time,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think our next order of business is lunch. Is it?
It's mostly out there. So
That's mostly, so we can mostly eat.
They're running by.
Dessert trays out there.
Dessert tray had made it.
We have.
Sorry, I did not join by sound. My apologies.
Are you ready?
Oh, okay. My apologies.
No.
I was dealing with my sound and missed it. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me and inviting me today. I'm Barb Guy. I'm the Director of Special Education here at the state. I'm Bureau Chief for a long name, Special Education, Student and Family Services for Special Education. Shortly in a few weeks to be changed as we have a new division, which is really exciting for us. So I'm here today to talk about IDEA, and I'm going to share my presentation here. And we'll talk about what that even means. So IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So IDEA and DA IDEA and DA stands for Differentiated Accountability. I really do treat acronyms as a second language. I will try very hard not to do that, but I know as I'm going fast, I will say IDEA a lot. So just know IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and DA is Differentiated Accountability. And we'll unpack especially the differentiated accountability part of that as we go. So that is actually what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give a really, really big picture on general supervision and where IDEA fits within general supervision. General supervision is a term that gets thrown out a lot and used a lot and probably has a lot of different connotations. I'm going to share what we mean by it when we talk about general supervision. And then I'm going to go into just a few components of IDEA that we call levels of support. I'll talk about three steps or three things that we do within IDEA. So the big picture, that was mostly to remind me what I was talking about. The big picture on this one, I'm going to start on the right side of this slide. And at the bottom where it says the state education agency system of general supervision must. This is what's in the language or code for that IDEA federally defines for us that we must, every state education agency must have a system of general supervision. And it must be first reasonably designed And then it must include monitoring, technical assistance, and enforcement. And when they talk about reasonably designed, the language in order says address improved results and functional outcomes. And then secondly, in the code or in federal language, it says to identify noncompliance, but grammatically it seemed incorrect for me. So I put it this way. But know that their first emphasis for general supervision is we're looking at results and then the noncompliance issues. In Iowa, the way we talk about it in Iowa is those 4 or 5, depending on how you look at inspect and detect. We talk about it in terms of an infinity loop because there isn't a linear process to the actions we do. Sometimes we might enter at an inspection. We've gotten a phone call from a parent or a school personnel they've started telling us something and we've already skipped the detect and gone right into the inspect. So we treat it as an infinity loop of those duties to inform, the duty to prevent, the duty to detect, the duty to inspect, and the duty to correct. And of course, another example for that connection is if we find that things that are detecting and districts are correcting, we might inform the rest of the state or remind them of something that is a compliance issue versus a non-compliance issue. So that's kind of what we mean by general supervision. Then if you look at the left side of this slide, you can see a number of the activities. I'm not going to go into these activities and the processes we use for those, except to show you that IDEA we consider to be a continuous improvement activity. And this slide also going back to IDEA and our administrative code, we are required from our primary focus of monitoring to focus on improving educational results. And that's why I've bolded that language there. And then we also have permission through the code and really an obligation to put our emphasis on those things that are most closely related to improving educational results. And the reason I put this slide in is as we started to build IDEA, our approach to compliance over the years has been procedural compliance, where we look at documents, we see if I's are in there and T's or the right words are there, because those are the strategies. That was the technology we had available to us. But now with the technology where we can drill down to student outcomes, we can see what their individual data are for assessments, their individual data for attendance, for dropout, for graduation, for 1 year after school. We are now able, and that's what IDEA does for us, I believe, is it blends these two. It helps us meet both of our obligations under the law. Okay, so here's kind of the basic talking point around differentiated accountability. We have designed it so that we can provide districts the support where they need it the most and maybe help them focus. We've heard many years that districts can't do everything, and sometimes we try to do everything, or we work on a little bit and then we move to the next. Sometimes they say shiny object, but it's also whatever might be squeaking the most or where we're calling attention to it. So this helps us be able to focus on that. And then it also helps us provide technical assistance in that program process. If you're talking to colleagues from out of state, the national movement has really talked more about results-based accountability. It is the same thing. So our differentiated accountability would be similar to what other states do or label as results-based accountability. And because we believe and know that it takes a while to change a system, we've built it in for a 3-year process. So a district would be identified, needing levels of support, and we would keep them there for 3 years to help and provide support to help improve the practices and outcomes. So there are 4 steps of this process. The first step really is one that the department does, which is to identify where districts are and what type of support level they need. I'm going to go in a little more detail into each of these 4 steps on what it means, but there's something called an implementation support rubric that we look at. I'll show you that in more detail. That we look at 3 years of data in order to identify a level of support for a district. We review those data, and based on the data, we set cut scores, and then we just assign a level to the district, and they are notified in the fall of what their assignment is. And then they keep that assignment for 3 years. And then once they've been identified in the first year of the cycle, they will complete a data review protocol, followed based on that, an implementation plan, and then they go about providing or engaging in professional learning and whatever is in their plan. And their plan usually involves both practice level activities, so things that affect teachers, that teachers will be doing in the classroom, as well as system level activities, looking at, I know a number of high schools are looking at their schedules in terms of, is a block schedule, when can they, if they're looking at career and technical education, they're looking at the schedule and the ability to provide the kinds of supports that kids need or the opportunities for sports. Go ahead.
Are you required by law to identify X number of school districts or?
No, but that's a great segue. Can I? Okay, we'll get to that. I can tell you that we can do it in any way we want to around this part of it. There are some ways for determinations on some indicators that OSEP requires that are based on simply where they're at in their percentages. And then it's anybody who hasn't reached 85%. In this process, we did select to identify our lowest 10% as level 3 districts because they need the most supports. And when I get to that slide, I'll tell you why. And you'll see the cut scores. I think it's certainly an area for good discussion. So these are the 4 focus areas that we look at. These are the data elements that we look at. Each of these areas in the implementation support rubric is equally weighted. So there's each one counts for 25 points or 25%. So a district could get a total score of 100. The 2 areas that have a red box around them, secondary transition and academic success, are the areas where we are focusing technical assistance right now, because those are the areas that showed us the need is greatest. And in the academic success, we're really focusing on early literacy, preschool through 6th grade, including students who have significant disabilities. This is what the elements guide looks like. I know this is really tiny. If you're very interested in it, there's a link on there that you can go to the DE website and see every variable that's under there. Each of the variables is weighted within that one of those 4 focus areas. With those indicators or those measures that are most likely to represent an outcome for a student, having a heavier weight than something that might be more of an internal process. Okay. So I know it says steps, but these are steps within step 1. So really it would be step 1.1. When we are identifying districts, we look at those data that I just showed you, scores up to 100 points. We look at even those districts, so districts who are really tiny or who may grade share, and they only have a couple of grades. If districts don't have at least 50% of the items that we can weight, we hand look at them. So every district gets reviewed in this process. And here's to your earlier question, step 2, we then assign the cut scores for this cycle of districts or of IDADA. And this is the first cycle ever, right? This is the first time we've been doing this. We identified 33 districts. That's our lowest 10%. And you can see the cut scores there, 53.6 to 62.5. And then if you go to the level 2 districts, we identified 65. Again, we did that number based on the resources we have to provide the level of supports needed. You can see that there was 1/100th of a point difference between the level 3, the high level 3 districts and the low level 2 districts. And so there is a pretty narrow band for a lot of districts to be in there. And if you look at the 229 districts, again, not much difference between the cuts. And only 3 districts were at 80 points or 80% or above. So there's a lot of work for us to do. We then identified supports around this. As I said already, we are focusing on secondary transition and early literacy, but we plan to use the same process
for additional topics as we start looking, as we have more staff to be able to provide capacity and support around this.
So Barbara, obviously there's levels of special education and, you know, the most severe and profound students, how are they included in this matrix?
Absolutely, they are.
Okay.
So
And how does that work if a district has quite a few of those students?
So the way it works, and I can pull it up if you want details, or we can send it to
Just
you.
in general.
If we go to the implementation support rubric and we look at the number of variables that are in that area that are focusing on academic success, we have a number of variables for significant disabilities. We have a number of variables for preschool special education. And then we have the other grade spans that are more typically represented in accountability matrices. And their weight is equally distributed across that 25%. So if a district is doing really well with their high school students and not so well for the kids with significant disabilities, that it filters out. And what ends up happening, especially with the scores where we are, it'll be interesting when we finally, when we get everybody at 85% or better, it'll be interesting how we'll probably have to reweight the matrix a little bit. But what happens then is, so they get identified for secondary literacy, and that's what's coming up. Then they go into their data and dig deeper into the data. We've identified data elements that we lead to selection of effective practices. So what I at least appreciate about this, and it's at least in the design and in a year and a half of implementation seems to be bearing fruit or bearing to be true, is that so many times there's just so much data out there. And if people don't know how to really understand the data and what the data represent, they can misinterpret it very easily. And so what we've done is selected the data for them to look at. So they don't have to choose which data elements are would lead them to an effective practice for literacy for kids with the most cognitive disabilities. We've given them those data to look at, but they get all the data for early literacy, for K-6, for preschool and SIGDIS, and they can go in there and identify where their greatest need is. And so we also then builds the ownership in terms of making changes and improvements. I don't know if I answered your question, but I know I gave you a lot of information.
Continue.
I don't quite get the district support levels. Is there somebody that's 65 and somebody that's 65.01? And what's the difference?
I'll get there in a sec. Well, there's a difference in the score. I'll give you what the difference is.
No, I mean, but it's only
Have to-
0.01
Correct.
in the score.
This is so.
And I assume there's different responses then required.
Right, there's different responses and different levels of support that we can give them based on that. You're correct. It's absolutely very close. And we had a lot of conversation internally about setting those cut scores and also what might be our obligations under the law if there's that much difference. And what we did is we've modeled this on how our federal office, the Office of Special Education Programs, looks at their monitoring support. They do not provide, they look at those who have the most needs based on the resources they can give. And that's why we call this a continuous improvement process and not a monitoring process. And if we go back to that slide I had earlier for general supervision and the whole list of things that we do under there, we still do monitoring. We do state complaints. We do focus monitoring where we might go in and because we suspect there's a systemic issue. Director, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. I think just one of those notes on Barb's presentation indicating that the levels and the cut scores that lead to the level designations are based on the current capacity of the department. And obviously, this is an update as we continue to implement legislation and restore the Division of Special Education within the department. So please expect a subsequent update, but we wanted to have the foundation of what currently exists as we continue to expand our continuous improvement supports to school districts.
So that leads to my next question. And you could say, wait till the end if you want.
No, this is good. I like it.
So what's going to change with the legislation that was just passed, and now we have more employees at the DE with special ed. What's going to change going forward?
What we hope, what we intend with that is to, at least two things. One is we can increase the consistency and certainly increase our assurance of the consistency and with which and fidelity with which the professional learning and the ongoing change, ongoing coaching is provided. We already heard in the last 6 months as we started providing professional development that there are variances across the state in terms of what's being said or being provided, as well as the capacity of the people who are providing it. So we'll be able to increase that. We'll also be able to increase the direct contact with classrooms and with buildings, which will then also hopefully increase the practices. One of the things, the materials that we are using in the packages, and I'll talk about this again in a little bit. The materials we're using for the SDI literacy packages, we have developed here in state with close partnership with LEA, with districts and AEAs over a course of 5 years. And what we have in there, we have a measurement tool for teachers around effective specially designed instruction. And what we know from our use of these packages or the development of the packages is that when teachers are implementing what we call the Iowa's framework for specially designed instruction, when they are implementing those techniques and strategies at a routine or sustained basis, children in their classrooms their growth in reading is greater than in classrooms where teachers are not at those levels. And so our hope is, our plan is, our outcome will be that more teachers are implementing specially designed instruction strategies at a routine, effective based at a routine or sustained level, and thus see increases.
What you're citing was statistically significant difference.
Yeah, I would be happy to share with you the study. Okay.
Different.
Yeah. No, we have an external evaluator for that, so I'm very confident in that, in the data that we've received on that.
Thank you.
The difference I will point out that we are curious about, and this is where I always get a little off script, which gets deeper, but the difference that we're curious about is the districts we worked with to develop the package were volunteers. So they are our advanced organizers, right? They're our advanced volunteers. We're now working with those districts who are in most need of support. And I will tell you, all of those districts are grateful for that. I've attended a number of what the next piece is, I'll just move to, this is what they got in terms of what the report tells them. And so to your earlier question about their data, they get their data for significant disabilities, for example, and they can see where their district is at in terms of a percentile compared to the rest of the state. I'm trying to jump ahead here. There we go. So this is what the package was, something that we call a data review protocol. So once a district is identified for a level 2 or level 3, we have a facilitated conversation with them. And the conversation is led by people who know the data and people who know the content area. It's a DE person, and in this past year, it's been an AEA person. Not quite sure what the structures will look like in the coming year. Definitely included a DE person. And we've assigned the area for level 2 and level 3, whether they go secondary transition or early literacy. Level 1 districts must review their data, but they don't have to use our protocol, and they don't have to have a facilitated conversation, although many of them did participate in facilitated conversations. And then they provide the implementation plan, and a progress report is due to us at the end of the school year, which we're in the process of collecting right now and analyzing. So here is not exactly what you asked for, but I think might be interesting to you. The first column these are level 3 districts. So these are the 33 districts that were identified. The first set The first column represents the regions. The second column identifies districts in that region who are identified as needing level 3 supports. And then the next couple of columns show you the topical areas that were selected and what they'll be working on for the next couple of years.
So how will the new structure with the DE mesh with the AEAs? How's that going to work?
It's actually, I think, going to be, I won't say seamless, but let's say smooth. In terms of the regional special education directors will continue to do, there are 2 types of coaching that are provided. One is monthly coaching at the system level, and the regional special ed director will continue to have those contacts with each of the district administrators that have been identified here. And then we will work with the AEA to identify how professional learning will be provided and how the ongoing coaching will be done, whether that will be through the new education program consultants who are DE employees or done in partnership with the AEA. Some of that just comes down to the capacity. The AEAs find this very valuable work, and in some senses frees up their time to do some of that coaching and professional learning. But we also will be using our EPC staff to do that. So we don't have everybody hired yet, so I can't give you more details than that.
Question.
Is it? Go for it.
Well, this basically, are you 50, 75% or hired completion, or where are you at?
We look forward to making it, we have multiple things and multiple processes. So we look forward to making an announcement when we are able to.
Stay tuned. Okay.
These are the data for level 2 districts. So then I've already talked a little bit about the providing and the fidelity measures is the tool that I talked about for what we call the FIT framework or implementation tool. That's actually built into Achieve. So for the first time, we'll have data from every teacher who is in a district. So from almost 100 districts on their implementation of specially designed instruction in either secondary transition or in secondary or early literacy. And then the other measure that we use for fidelity is a coaching self-assessment. So we'll know about the capacity of our coaches and where they may need resources to ensure that we are providing information that is accurate and consistent. And this is my last slide, and we'll open up for more questions. This is a listing of the topics that are covered in the professional learning that's provided. It links if you're going to, I'm going to guess that there might be a question about how does this fit in with the LETRS work that the state is involved in. We are working, the K-6 literacy is based in a lot of the science of reading. And we have a full package on that. And we are actually working with the district right now to look at how, resources are also part of resources looking at professional learning and how many times we can release staff to do. And so we're looking at how we can scaffold on what we know from our previous efforts is the work in LETRS is extraordinary and very important, but it is not sufficient for kids with disability to change the growth rate for kids with disabilities. That there is more that you need to do in order to take into account their disability. And so we're looking at how we can blend those and maximize staff time in learning those skills. That's it.
That's all.
What questions? What other questions do you have? I personally am really excited. I feel like this came about. This and our reorganization have come together at a time when we have an opportunity to really build on this and maybe see some quick turnarounds for a change. But I've been here a few years, so I'm interested in seeing quicker turnarounds.
Something I always wondered about, Barbara, is any information about students who begin special ed, formal interventions in special ed. And how long they stay in the special ed programming until they are released. Do you have any data that can be shared? Not now, but
Right, we looked at, when we first began the identification of the need to focus on special designed instruction to improve the effectiveness of specially designed instruction, which led us to the package, especially the early literacy packages. We did a pretty in-depth analysis of our student data. And that was a number of years ago. So we are due to re-examine that. But when we looked at it then, and really just 2 or 3 years ago, we don't exit a lot of students. The number of students we exit from special education is pretty minimal. And I'm hoping that what we can see with this kind of work is that we move kids who no longer, I never want to exit somebody who needs to continue supports, but if they don't need them, we should also exit them out. We do have data, our outcome data, the post-school outcome data shows what happens after high school. And those data could be improved upon. We can talk about that too. The other thing I should say is again, in the district that we are looking to work with and collaborate with on the combined SDI K-6 and preschool data with letters, they have started looking at their data about effectiveness and outcomes for kids after they exit. So we are looking at that as a possible method, but I haven't talked with Jay about whether he thinks it's statistically logical.
nothing is a priority. It's just interesting. I have a grandson who exited the program last year.
How old, what grade?
He was a sophomore at that time.
Let's talk. I'm just curious about, I'm curious about why did he exit?
Well, we can have it.
Yeah, that's why I said, let's talk. My heart, I worked here for 25 years and I came in as a secondary transition consultant. So I'm always, my heart, although I love all of them, but the little kids, I like them, but I love the rest. Secondary transition is really my passion. So I'm really interested in what we're doing to make sure those linkages are occurring after school. And I think that we do have a pattern, some districts have a pattern of exiting students from special education because they have their credits, but they may not have the skills they need yet for their careers. So I'd be happy to visit with you if you would like that.
Seems like I'm the one asking all the questions. Anybody else? Thomas, you have a question or a
More of
comment?
an observation, just the relationship between letters, like high quality general education and specially designed instruction. I was doing, because great minds think alike. I was like Brian, I was purging my office and getting rid of old papers on the handout for the continuing ed event. I went to, the title is the biggest problem in special education, general education. And it's the biggest problem, special education being responsible for responding to poor core instruction. And using special education to try to intervene out of a poor core instruction. I think letters, the science of breeding, intentional focus on high quality core instruction is going to liberate special education to do more specially designed instruction rather than responding to deficiencies in core, adult caused deficiencies in core instruction. So that was the two sync up quite well in my mind because the purpose of special education is to stack on top of core instruction, not to do what core should have done in the first place.
But you know,
Editorial done.
that then begs the question is what are we doing in teacher prep programs, right? Across our colleges and universities, right?
Which the bill, which the science of reading bill addresses in some part.
In some part.
Yes, so there is a requirement in recently enacted legislation to ensure that teacher preparation programs align to the components of what is the science of reading and do not provide preparation in free queuing in particular.
I did see that. I did.
So we look forward to supporting the board's work to update the teacher preparation standards to reflect that, and the approval process to reflect that new statutory requirement.
To start.
What a great presentation.
Oh,
What great work.
Thank you. It's just the best time to come in on your last session, right after your late meal and a muggy room. So that was really nice to hear something.
It was
Thank you.
Hey, Barbara,
Yeah, all right, thank you.
anything else? Are we adjourned?
Well, do we need to make a motion to adjourn? If so, I make that motion.
We made it. Else want to second that? Second? Any discussion?
Sorry.
All in favor? Give us a opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all.